This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Naruto was Saito Stark. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
He called out when he thought she was out of earshot. "I know you're there. Is there something you need?" He was grateful that the voice came from behind him because it concealed the sudden widening of his eyes. "None. But forgive me for eavesdropping." The fact that he recognized this voice was what triggered this reaction, turning back to his sluggish expression. The former Hollow saw the person who, in some way, had brought him back. He didn't say much about her clothing. She had swapped out the loose beige jacket of her youth for a lavender one with sleeves that reached her wrists, which complemented her longer blue hair. Although it looks a little loose, it appeared lighter and slimmer. However, it still described the extent to which maturity had been applied to the girl's, no, woman's, body, if that was Stark's main concern. Her face piqued the former Espada's interest more. She had not changed since he had last seen her. Those eyes are anything but pale and blank, and the soft face behind a neutral mask, now more at ease, perhaps to appear more approachable or less menacing. "Good day. I apologize for interrupting something." "Good day to you too, and don't worry, it wasn't much a secret anyway." To this, a sensitive eyebrow was raised, but I'm given an impression of its importance. He turned back to the grave of Haku. "It was. I didn't know how much till now." After giving him a nod, she moved to stand close to him. "I guess as much as it also had an effect on your friend." "So what sparked your curiosity to this particular duo?" He might have been dreaming, but he was certain he saw a trace of embarrassment. "My apology earlier extends also in the restaurant." "I see, so she was there the entire time." Now that he had seen them again, he made the decision to ask what he wanted to know. "Tell me, was there a shop like that somewhere?" He sensed the tension emanating from the kunoichi. There was, but they moved out after things went sour. Based on the intensity of her gaze, she also experienced a sour situation when she gives him back her sight, though she loses it. "Have you been there?" He swiftly arrived at the location she was referring to. "You can say I lived there as far as I remember before I too departed." "And you?" She was able to respond without missing a beat because the subject appeared to be relative. "It was my mission to accompany them here. You two were actually their very first customers. That's why the first bowls were free." "I see," he says, his eyes growing so far away that the shorter of the two could see it. Knowing she knew where he was referring, he answered, "But I doubt we will get the same treatment if I return to that place with all that I learned. It's unlikely they will kindly take those of our kind." With a subtle shift in attitude, she asked intently, "Have you given reasons to prove your claims?" He and Naruto shared an amazing power that kept many people at bay. If he remembered much of their respective pasts before he became the person he is today with Lilynette, he had no idea what he had done. Their days were spent in solitude. Although Lilynette created a bit of a stir, they hadn't done anything during Las Noche that would raise such suspicions aside from following Aizen intentionally. Nothing comes to mind, neither did Fu. Her posture loosened a little, but he saw how similar her sympathy was to Ayame's. Then the Ichirakus meant what they said, as well as this country, especially for her. Stark was aware of what she was discussing, but he needed to be certain, which is why he gave her a sharp look. He heard the last part, which was a grief-laced whisper. "Forgive me again for intruding, but I somehow sensed something peculiar of her that reminded me of someone. If how you insinuated, you both had a hard life, just like him. You can start anew here as they give chances to prove who you truly are. I was given an opportunity. What about you?" He's not sure if it was the appropriate course of action. Don't let him be in the way. "I beg your pardon?" Despite the obvious steel in her eyes and voice, the Primera continued on. "I apologize, for it's not my place to be offensive if it's also how you insinuated. Whoever he is, he seems like one who cherishes those precious to him and wish for their happiness. How hypocritical of me. I guess it will hurt him knowing that he is the reason for others' sadness." Her face softens and she looks off into space again. "It's hard to give up the reason why you keep living. I did not say forget. Bring the memories with you, but carry it on your back. That way you could see what's in front of you. I'm not sure if it will work, but at least you can see clearer ahead and have something to look back to, or meet someone like him." Such a simple advice, but I doubt it is. A tiny smile that strangely combines humor and sorrow appears. He snorted, sigh. "Nothing is." Her response suggests that it was humorous, based on experience. He moaned, "Still find it hard." Relatively quiet, they remained there, less uneasy than before. "It's sad, I couldn't say much to him till it was too late. There were some similarities between them. Welcome to the club." Silence once more. However, she broke it remarkably. It's through her quiet chuckle. The swordsman gave her a perplexed look as a result. "Forgive me once more, for being discourteous this time. I'm Hinata." "So that's her name. Grateful to have finally met her." He grinned and responded, "Coyote Starrk, but just Stark is fine." The smile was small, but there was a hint of joy in her eyes. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Stark-san. I appreciate our talk, but I best be going now." He was experiencing an internal struggle as he watched her go. He is partially to blame for Hinata's inability to move on. The former Hollow wanted her to at least let go of his former self because of this right now. Should I heed my own counsel? Shojuro-senpai, there too many? I know. Go take the codes and the wounded back to base. I'll hold them off. But your wounds, there's no time. Shojuro kept cursing his misfortune. Protecting this group, who were returning with information that would aid the rebels, was the responsibility of the unofficial 7 Shinobi Swordsman member. Unexpected things happen, but once they realized they were in a trap, it was hard. He was among those who suffered injuries. Even though he didn't think much of himself, he considered himself to be among the strongest right now. His only choice, however, given his injuries and the fact that he was currently outnumbered, was to hold them off until his teammates returned to base, and ideally send backup. 2 cloaked figures caught both factions' attention with a sudden rustle of the foliage. The identity of these intruders was a mystery to both sides. However, they were taken aback when the taller one brandished a big, famous sword. "The Kabikirabocho, Zabuza, I thought he died." "No matter. Take all the traitors down. Bu, but it's the duh. The Mizukage despise failure. Now attack." The larger group dispersed and began pursuing the intruders without the excitement. Shojuro would have seen the smaller one palm its face and said sardonically, "Now we know which side." A note from the author. 1. Recall that I mentioned translating jutsu. I only do it when I feel like it. In addition, it is unnecessary because they are too familiar. What do you think, then? It's up to you, but I might ask for reviews. In any case, I was drawn to one review by Hikaru Winter. I got some scenes and adventures that could be placed as an omake but might be related to the plot, so it seemed like a good idea. I was considering creating a sort of side story akin to Manian's, Ouroboros. Side stories, however, I'll publish it here first. Oh, and I got this one down in a flash of madness, thanks to a Fate fan. It's only for fun, and crack, so don't worry. Who is the best dog? How on earth did I end up in this mess? What exactly is bothering the once dreaded soldier of the strongest army Aizen has ever assembled? When they arrived in a town that felt very familiar, it was a sign that something was going to go wrong, not seriously, but badly. It was just like any other town. They stopped, ate, rested, and, if they were short on cash, found work. They had been traveling for a while, getting to know each other, if it wasn't talking. Fu wanted some spars to get stronger, she says. Fu needed it more than Stark, who could live without this. They occasionally delivered, cleaned, waited at tables, and performed other tasks. However, Fu began to detest guard work because she finds it annoying that the swordsman keeps nodding off. Despite his repeated claims that he is aware of his surroundings, it was made worse by the absence of burglars to beat up. To save time, they made the decision to part ways. Since she is familiar with the necessities, she would gather the supplies while Stark searches for any opportunity. He concluded that it would be worthwhile to try the restaurant or bar. A break seems good when there is no opening, but if he can't sleep, a bored, beyond normal, Stark usually finds something to do. This lone wolf was given some small entertainment in the form of poker by a group gathered around a table. The Primera's sharp mind managed to understand the game while they were watching. He therefore concluded that some Ryu would be a good diversion. They chose to make fun of the stranger despite not taking him seriously due to his small stash and easygoing demeanor. The game went on without anyone laughing. They were all gradually falling for this man. They don't mind his luck, though this guy had something worse than a poker face, the bored poker face, which they were unable to explain. That winning became monotonous because it happened so often. He only raised an eyebrow, and it was unclear whether that was an expression of surprise or curiosity. He only lost once, when his female companion slapped him in the head for falling asleep. Others took their place, but one in particular attracted Stark's attention. If the chest area in that jacket meant anything, it was a woman. However, that was her physique. The face, well, attractive, if you ignore the untamed hair, sharp teeth, and snarling eyes. Additionally, he unconsciously recalled the other female Arankars he had met because she had red triangle tattoos beneath each eye, now only if her mask was hollow. Sume, why are we gallivanting here? This made all present to look lower to where the voice originated. They didn't search far because they noticed a huge dog with an eye patch halfway through. The owner sat down and placed a large wager, saying, "To relax, we're done already and I'm in no hurry to go back. I think I remember someone with a dog somewhere. She looks familiar." She had a bigger stash, but it was still far smaller than his, and they played until only the two of them remained. He didn't notice the woman's smirk because he was too focused, or not focused enough. Her rough question was, "Hey bud, how about we now raise up the notch?" He answered loosely, not paying attention to anything. "Yeah, Whatever, he was getting ready to hold his hand when she said, "Strip." He was not aware of the predatory smile that appeared. Startled, he lost because he dropped the cards. What? He disregarded Fu's charge of infidelity. "You accepted it then, and they're a set of clothing along with 100 ryu," she replied with a grin. Still shocked, he thought of how to benefit from this. Then he remembered the dog. If they were from Konoha, that means they recognize Naruto's scent. So acting irritated, Stark set his money and threw his gloves out, one landing on the dog's nose, feigning apology now. Though he did feel sorry, the wolf Hollow retrieved the glove. The dog didn't show any sign of recognition, which is good, but it surprised him that the dog looked up at him and said in a tone that could be placed in between caution and respect, "You smell of wolf." A powerful one at that. Not sure how to respond to that. A short answer might suffice. "I had been around some." This caught Sum's attention. "It seems you're not surprised that he talks." "I had seen stranger things, so it doesn't bother me," while thinking that she will tire out the bluff. "And I don't?" she amusingly asked. He thought of the more rowdy ones. "Neither dealt also with some like you." He failed again to notice the way she was eyeing him. As the game got longer, the Primera's comfort shortens. The "she's bluffing," he keeps telling himself, is getting more unlikely by the rounds. He intentionally loses a few hands to try to get her to give up. He has already put down his sandals, socks, jacket, sash, and pair of gloves. The shirt that is covering his chest hole should be his concern, however. Compared to what he is currently dealing with, that appears to be the least of his issues. Though it's different. Sume loses one article of clothing more than he does. She misplaced the jacket, sandals, pouch, and forehead protector. Fortunately, she was wearing shorter pants, and the sports bra kept everything partially modest. This kind of thing wouldn't bother someone who had dealt with the current tertiary, yes, but Haribel didn't give him the impression that he was a piece of meat that was about to be attacked, though given this woman's affinity for particular animals, it was extremely likely nothing like this had ever been dealt with by the strongest of the Espada. "How on earth did I end up in this mess?" One was uncomfortable, and the other was caught between laughter and shame. In order to win more easily, she hoped he would break. However, she decided to push it a bit further because she was having fun. "Impressive, it's like you played your whole life." Arankar, who was now perspiring, stammered, "See, actually it was only a few minutes." Emphasizing the last part, the statement goes, "Oh really? Then you had more time to work on your sword of yours, maybe a few years." He is venturing into uncharted territory that he is able to determine. "If it's about my age, the beard makes me look older." For extra impact, the leer was used, and attractive by the way. He now understands that he must stop right there. 100 for each of your clothes, and 4 to stop. How's that sound? He almost begged, not one for formality. He is attempting to maintain his composure, and it was sufficiently generous. He, bribing me? How well, partner, you better think of something else if you want to get out of here. Now it's your draw, she said. He was afraid of that something challenging, something about dignity, somehow drew him in. Screw dignity, sanity is the issue here. He hopes that he will have bad luck. Ironic. The Primera looked at the card and put his hand down, then he extends his hand. Everyone was pushed back with a bang after they had all regained their composure. Sume saw that her opponent had left even the girl who was with him, along with his clothes and the majority of the money. The cards and the stack he was attempting to use as a bribe were all that remained. She was more interested in what he had than in how the cards held up after the customers were blown back in regal flush. She smirked despite feeling somewhat insulted. However, you have to admire a fortunate and naive man. Well, that lucky son of a. The air began to change at the town's edge, where it was nearer the woods, until a strange scene developed. A man who appeared to be in a panic and was naked was breathing heavily as if he had just run a mile. One hand held a jacket that contained his dignity, while the other held a stunned girl with frazzled hair carrying a bag of what? "I don't know about you, but I'm camping tonight," he blurted out. "This is it. It's do or perish." More than 7 years had passed since she joined the rebellion. More than 5 years had passed since she assumed leadership, and less than a year had passed since they made any real headway. Indeed, Terumi Mei was now reflecting on how everything would culminate in their last attack the following day. The civil war that Mizukage started will come to an end tomorrow. The bloodline purge left many people scarred or dead. She understands the weight of the battle because she is the bearer of not one, but 2 Kekkei Genkai. Those who resisted Yagura's order and those who managed to avoid the purge were collected by the rebellion faction. She remembered everyone who had given their lives to restore what had been lost as a result of his rule. Hazuka Mangetsu, one of the 7 shinobi swordmen, assisted them. The current generation's prodigy joined the resistance because his clan also had a bloodline limit. Many people believed that he was the last one due to their unsuccessful escape. He was separated from his brother. In order to transmit the wisdom and customs of the greatest swordsman of the mist, he now instructs the newest recruits and takes on an apprentice. He continued to take part in raids on purportedly illicit trades while also keeping an ear out for any rumors about his brother. They took control of a hideout buried on one island, which was their only successful discovery. They learned that a crazy Konoha trader used this bunker as a laboratory for experiments. One of those poor victims was the only one who didn't fight against them, the only one who still had her humanity according to her. A boy who has the ability to transform into water was brought there years ago and then moved to an unknown location. She was willing to support their cause and is currently in their care. They continued to look for the others, however. Ao's intelligence indicated that they were either lost, dead, or unknown. After killing another sword, the lost one now works for the Mizukage. Mei was the only one who felt betrayed out of all of them. She now lost another close friend, which was the reason. Similar to Yagura's abrupt transformation, the action was still unknown. There might not be much time left, but she wanted to know why before it's too late. But she chose to concentrate on what needed to be done with what little they had. Their struggle also involved a desperate attempt to enlist outside assistance. And when they happened to run into the newest members, she felt she had discovered a gem. Although she was gently reprimanded by the girl's guardian, she was almost ecstatic to learn that Fu was a Jinchuriki of the Seven Tails, and that they now had someone who might have a chance to fight the tyrant. But when she discovered that her control is far inferior to Yagura's, she may have discovered a rough gem with little value. The girl views it as a last resort and is extremely reluctant and insistent on using it. Disappointed, she chose to hone the girl's abilities, which were surprisingly simple. They might be able to match Mizu's remaining Jinchuriki with their emergency trump card. However, she might as well acknowledge that they had discovered two. She shuddered inwardly at the thought of losing them. XXXXX. She examined the two in front of her and said, "Well, you did bring back Zabuza's sword, so I guess there's little complications in letting you two join, especially with her." After a few discussions, she thought up of all the benefits of having Fu on their side, but it seems that her companion was in charge. With all this, the rebel leader thinks she wasn't the only one who thinks he's unimpressive. Bored gaze and slouching posture tends to do that. However, in their line of work, nothing is always what they seemed. But I'm curious why. Shrugging, the man before her replied, "Let's just say that it's honoring a dying man's." Baya, though few heard it, the word was never finished due to a hand that was slowly choking the speaker. Ao wasn't the only one who was having trouble in breathing. Everyone in the room felt a crushing force that had brought everyone much closer to the floor. The stronger ones stood a little higher off the ground, watching in horror as this stranger strangled one of their best with ease. There wasn't even time to wonder how he got across the room. More narrowed eyes than before met Ao's terrified one as he was held in place by a firm grip that was both tight and loose enough to allow him to breathe. If she had to guess, this would indicate that he meant business. Mei, who had personally witnessed such power, bet that the odds were now in their favor. But on the other hand, she knew that the risk of losing such favor is a lot higher. She thought, "So he knows the Hyuga. How and when did you acquire that eye?" Ao recovered enough to respond, We fought against a group from Konoha during a mission, 10 years ago." Then, when he was abruptly dropped and the pressure was applied, he was interrupted once more. Many became tense for various reasons after they were able to control themselves again. Ao for prudence and a little fright because of his closeness with their weapons out. The rebels readied themselves for assault. Mei is anxious and eager to see what he will do next, and Fu, who is now crouched, will most likely defend himself. But the man just stood there, his posture lax to compare to what happened seconds ago. For the same amount of time, his hardened gaze returned to its neutral state. When he looked at their leader, the tension grew even more. However, it was interrupted by astonished bewilderment when he turned back to face Ao and made a tiny bow. Ao nervously nodded back, seemingly accepting the apology. "Sorry about that." He moved slowly back to where he had been. He also bowed slightly to Mei after taking hold of the girl's shoulder, presumably to soothe her. "I'm sorry about this. I hope this doesn't cause problems with our deal." His tone made it impossible for Mei to discern how sincere his words were. She decides to try her luck after giving the order for her troops to stand down. "It won't if I'm guaranteed that something similar will not happen again." He merely nodded lazily, but his sudden animosity piqued her interest. "Tell me, you have ties with that clan?" His prompt response was, "Only one," with a raised eyebrow, "and the rest?" "Don't know, don't care." His slight facial expressions were sufficient to indicate that this particular subject was resolved. XXXXX Coyote Starrk. It would be difficult for many to accept that this lanky-looking man was hiding such power with his disposition. It would have been simple. "We conceal something because we are shinobi," she thought. However, she thought it was humorous because his persona was more samurai-like. The way he held his sword made it more obvious. Since I had never seen the swordsman draw it, I became even more curious about his abilities. Chojuro, however, attested to the fact that Stark defeated the adversaries barehanded, while carrying the Kabikirabocho. He gave it to Mangetsu with ease using just one hand, demonstrating his strength. His speed was observed during the operations he took part in, ideally with the group they first met, and it would have sounded exaggerated if she hadn't joined them. Sensing abilities that a tracker would consider astounding. What was even more startling, though, was that his expression of indifference concealed a sharp mind following some observations. He was able to offer recommendations that reduced their casualties. Much more if he were the one carrying them out. But great people have their moments, she said. Recalling his most recent incident with a laugh, the man's demeanor was surprisingly humble given the attention he could have received. More like uninterested, she recalled with nostalgia. Many were initially nervous, but they eventually grew accustomed to the slothful jerk. In some way, he blended in with the group he accidentally saved more quickly, earning Chojuro's respect. He was regularly asked to assist with Fu's training, which in some way led to the development of a typical sibling bond. The one with the cruel but kind sister. However, based on her observations, the lone wolf gives particular attention to certain people she initially believed it was to win favor, particularly from bloodline people. However, Mei thought the swordsman was simply being with kindred spirits when he kept an eye on people like Isaribi, who went on to become the group's younger sister. He exuded a sense of guilt and was compensating for it. Although he didn't show much, he was considerate of those close to him. Even though he continued to appear uninterested, Stark is so personable that many people can rely on him. Oddly enough, she thought she was deserving of the task she gave him. She hoped that it would be beneficial, but in actuality, it was more of a selfish request. XXXXX. As he clashed blades with his opponent, the Primera thought sardonically, well, ain't this a fine mess you ended up with? After all this time, why did he draw his sword? Stark looks for the opponent he was told to face after splitting from Fu and Chojuro, who were the primary force behind eliminating the grunts. However, from what he recalls, it was more of a request, and he continued to question why he didn't turn it down. Electrifying was the only response he received when asked how he would characterize her. It was this description that saved his back when the mist grew thicker. He hasn't used his pesquisa in direct combat in a long time, but it was a great aid to his hierro in preventing the blades from striking his hidden opponent, and he continued to battle for a while until he made a startling discovery. The former Espada was informed that things would get serious. The sound of sparks would have been the first hint. The most noticeable was the numb sensation on his slashed arm. He was taken aback, but he had to dodge a bright slash that cut him in order to counter each blow. He had to draw his katana to strengthen it and lessen the blade's secondary effect. He applied Riryoku. His opponent was finally revealed as the clash and flash began to clear the fog. Ringo Amayuri, the notorious Serpent of the Hidden Mist, was Kiba, a short woman wearing Hunter Division armor and brandishing thunder swords. The Primera suspected how she earned the title, but confronting her revealed another theory. She fought very nimbly, spinning in midair as lightning followed her as she spins around. Her figurative fangs strike viciously. Resembling the movements of a recoiling snake, she battled with the grace of a cobra, the ferocity of a python, and the agility of a viper. Then the epithet brought back memories of some unpleasant snake encounters. He couldn't remember anything more than that it was with Orochimaru. Nevertheless, he didn't have the heart, sort of, because of one of the many reasons he could hardly recall for detesting the snake, a soft-looking creature with a rough tongue. At least she's courteous when she insults me, he thought involuntarily. After that, there was a pause for both of them to catch their breath and determine what they had learned about one another. They used what others would describe as an incredible swordplay as a yardstick. Stark looked at his cut for a moment, but now she had a smirk on her face when he looked back at her, wondering how you got cut. Being perceptive, I had my clues, she agreed casually. Indeed, but I must admit, whatever technique you used made your skin to be comparable to steel. Even your clothes withstood each strike. She carefully eyed her opponent and pointed the blade that was still sparking with power. She then looked at the sword he was wielding and said, normal attacks don't seem to overly affect you. To make me use its ability should be remarkable. But I'm amazed that your katana is still intact, even though it doesn't look special. You're into praising, don't you? Let me give you the honor of being the second person to make me bleed. I get that a lot, but the wound has already stopped bleeding. Ah, are you waiting for something? He elaborates in response to the woman's inquisitive expression. Well, that was dumb. If you haven't noticed, you know what can cut me, so wouldn't my back be painted red by now? But for some reason, she saw it differently, confident. Are we? Maybe, but I have reasons why I cannot be. He nodded, signaling her to go on. Silent killing was rendered irrelevant by the statement. Well, first, the flashes and crackles destroy the subtlety, and second, you drew your sword. Stark's expression had changed to one of inquiry. Okay. I doubt I'm the first swordsman you met, so what makes me special? She nodded absently, as though nothing had occurred. Indeed, many can use a sword, but few knew how to hold it. Once more, the perplexing reasoning. Hold? Strangely, her complimentary tone just came back. That's right? Was that an insult? Your stance is of a swordsman, a reluctant one, but one nonetheless. The entire conversation was strange because I was shorter. But what does it have to do with you? You're a shinobi, I mean kunoichi. She nods casually once more. Yes, before you drew your blade. I fought like one, but now your sword is revealed. It is deemed worthy by tradition to fight you as a swordsman, or my case, swordswoman. Is she flirting? Stark can't help but scratch his head, even though he knows he can't be distracted. Mind a little history lesson? The woman's superior appearance seemed to soften over time, or perhaps Stark was dreaming. Gladly the ancestors of the Seven were. Believe it or not, samurai the teachings were more of that of a shinobi, but there are traditions that can be applied to times such as now. We are given a choice to issue a challenge to whoever points a sword. This is a surprising development, the espada wondered. Don't take this the wrong way, but it sound way too noble for a shinobi. Are you sure about this? She bent down to a crouching stance, eyes seemingly diverted elsewhere. Yes, but at least I can do one thing I won't regret. Great, another one. With how her eyes soften, in contrast with her hardened features. He is familiar with this expression. Hinata, Fu, Mei. Heck, he thought he had seen enough with the more sane Arankars and those in the rebellion camp. She is hiding her pain. Why tell me these? It's as if he was hindered by a humorless chuckle. Correct again. This time, Amayuri's eyes hardened with a resolve as she stared back. We both have our goals, like you already know. I'm not the only one who's holding back, call it intuition, but though you are not a shinobi, you gave the feel of hiding something great. He said grimly, so you're saying, only one of us will make it out? More like I can't find it. This time, she gave a determined nod. I would be a fool to think otherwise. So an honorable death matches sigh. How troublesome. The former espada took a loose stance and a leaf from a nearby tree slowly fell off, as though to indicate that their duel was about to continue after it touched down. XXXXX. Haramekare Kaiho. And a shinobi band was hurled away by a big hammer. They had the quality factor in this round. Even though both teams were evenly matched, Chojuro, the twin swords wielder, believed this being the apprentice of the torrent of the hidden mist was a bonus if he was being more arrogant. Mangestu Senpai had a difficult but worthwhile training experience. Nearby, a group of rebels were being overrun. However, a minor earthquake on their side stopped the adversaries. The black figure exploded out of the ground beneath them. Shurikens were thrown by many, but they were swatted like flies. The figure hit everything in its path as it ran toward enemy lines. When she got to the middle of the crowd, she was holding a hand seal. Clear out. Doden. Shidoyuhira, originally intended to confuse, it created a tremor and flung rocks and debris everywhere by overloading it with the Nanabi's enormous chakra supply. A column of water was on its way to her before anything settled. Doden. Doryuheki, she exclaimed, slamming her hands once more to form a fresh set of seals, and a wall of hardened earth withstood the current. The wall appeared to float as the flow slowed and a crack was heard. The girl was actually the one who lifted it. Batter up. And launched the massive missile while some managed to avoid the flying rock. The glowing hammer redirected it to another location, eliminating more of them. Her skin tone returns to its natural state. Hey, Chojuro. How are things there? After he fired at another assailant, he called back, fine, for now. Hope Isaribi is doing better. The fish girl was tasked with removing some of the ships that were scheduled to deliver reinforcements. Chojuro can't resist a little giggle. Even though we are Kiri shinobi, very few are as versatile as she is when underwater, he assuredly laughed. At that moment, they heard the flash of light rising from a nearby location and the sound of sparks. For a moment, Fu froze. However, it was sufficient to divert her attention as another wave crashed in her direction, but a glowing wall saved her. The water was carried back towards the user by Chojuro's swing of the enormous sword projection. He looked at the girl anxiously. They were aware of her issue. Fu. Snap out of it. They said they attempted to correct this. Even though she still freezes, she can now recover quickly and complete her tasks. As long as the lightning stays far away. Can you still go on? After some time, she responded, yeah, but Chojuro was not persuaded. Are you sure? You can move somewhere the other side could. No, she shouted insistently. Her resolve was evident in her eyes, even though she was still tense. They're counting on us to hold them back. I won't fail them because I was afraid. Chojuro saw a flare approaching their location before he could confirm immediately. Take cover. A big cloud was thrown up by what landed as the dust gradually settled. The words, "Oich, that's gonna sting in the morning." were heard. Riga. They saw another flare speeding toward the crash site, this time sparking. Bala. A red ball shot out from the dust, causing a bright flash when the two opposing forces met. All shielded their eyes, but they started hearing the striking of steels and felt the air getting heavier. When their eyes adjusted, they saw two people who were glowing. One had sparks flying around her, while her opponent appeared to be on fire. Both were covered in a blue aura. The fight was so elegant and deadly that it briefly halted both groups. However, they all felt that power was increasing, so they all cleared a path to avoid being caught in the crossfire when the male fighter's aura became apparent. Those who were unfamiliar with him were told to keep their distance or risk collapsing, as demonstrated by the fact that those who weren't quickly fell over when they were too close to him. The Primera grasped something, locking blades in a halt. For her to still be standing, never mind fighting, means she has a strong spirit. I am aware that he said it would take some time for me to regain my power. How long, however? Although he hasn't yet attempted to unlock his resurrection, the concept was left unfinished by the absence of his other half. However, Amayuri's backward leaning helped him regain his equilibrium. She used it as a diversion to get away from him, but he blocks the sword that was aimed at his chest. When he saw how slightly deeper her breath was, he understood why. As he persisted in his attack, he thought, so it seems that she is still affected, though a lot better than most. She threw smaller but faster lightning bolts while maintaining a wide margin, suggesting that she had gotten the idea. As he pursued, Stark retaliated with his bala as well. She was also able to match his sonido in speed thanks to the lightning armor. Her senses are heightened in some way because she was able to block his blow when he unexpectedly appeared next to her. While Stark worriedly caught sight of a very frightened Fu, Amayuri observed that there were fewer of her factions in the audience they had gathered. They kept exchanging blows, and strangely, their battle never stopped. Then they found themselves in a stalemate once more. However, the swordswoman saw that the sword was only in one hand. A fist crashed back to where she had been standing, and she instantly released her grip and leapt. The lightning brightened. After a somersault, she stabbed both swords into the ground as soon as she touched down. Raiden. Ikazuki no Utage. Stark and several others were struck by electricity that traveled through the ground. Stark remained upright as he watched her climb a nearby structure. She pulled the kiba together and hit them on the roof. After reaching the top, the sky darkened as though she had called for it. As menacing as it appeared, a stream of lightning called out her technique as it shot towards the clouds. Raiden. Sandagedo. The Hollow attempted to create a Sero after he sensed the numbness in his arms. However, it only flickered in front of his face. Crap. Still unable to stabilize it, after dancing, lightning began to strike. After regaining his sensation, he began blasting in rapid succession. Many began to flee, but what he saw made his blood chill. A bolt was hurtling toward her, but Fu was motionless. Stark came out of nowhere, shoved her away, and then used his katana to swat the lightning away. However, he was compelled by instinct to raise the sword to his chest and only land on the blade's spike nearest to the hilt. The blade that protruded from his back, still glowing with power, was viewed with horror by the remaining rebels. He gazed down at a blank face, stunned not only by the electricity but also by a feeling of familiarity. Even though she was frowning, her eyes were serious. The words, "I'm sorry," were hardly audible. NNNOOO, and then a threatening aura that made the woman drop the weapon. The blow that sent her hurtling across the battlefield was lessened by the lightning that was still covering her. She turned to face her assailant after gaining her bearings. Even though she was doing better than the others, she was still afraid. What she had once thought was the girl was now something to be genuinely afraid of. Her body turned a bloody red, as if her skin were peeling off. Her shoulders began to be covered in white materials that formed improvised armor. Her face began to take on the same substance, forming a horned mask with slits to conceal the hateful eyes that stared back at her. On her back, the chakra cloak took the form of 5 protuberances, resembling a long tail and 4 wings. Amayuri waited for her next move while standing there terrified. Before long, the Jinchuriki was gliding across the terrain. When she stuck the head, crushed debris was visible as it rose in smoke. Abruptly, the swordswoman came to her side and stabbed. However, it failed to penetrate despite creating a tiny crack in the shoulder region. The girl threw her again with a forceful backhand. The burn on her clothing demonstrated how the lightning armor is deteriorating, but it still held. The Kiri Kunoichi was ready when the girl reappeared in front of her. She tried several strikes and dodged. It only seemed to enrage the girl more, if the attacks had any effect at all. Shreds appeared all over the woman, and each of the beast's attacks came closer to tearing her to pieces. Several lightning balls she fired from a distance were either batted away or dodged. The girl was momentarily stunned when Amayuri threw a particularly large ball of lightning. She attempted a quick retreat but was quickly stopped. Grasping the swordswoman's long hair, The beastly girl threw her in the direction of a building. She was still conscious, but her body was limp when a wall collapsed shortly after landing. The girl began stalking in the direction of her target. But because she was restrained by glowing chains, she was hampered. She followed it back to a glowing sword that a boy wearing goggles was holding. Phew! She's already down. That's enough. He yelled in a panic. However, it was in vain because she grabbed the chain and slammed Chojuro against another wall with a powerful tug. At last, she took a stand in front of her and glared at the source of her hatred. You killed him. On the other hand, the woman calmly glanced back and saw that some steam was coming out of the area she assumed to be the eyes. The girl held up a hand with claws, feeling guilty. Do it. The Jinchuriki screamed and plunged her weapon to put an end to it. However, she was once more held captive by a hand. She glared at the intruder before meeting Stark's stern stare. A powerful, familiar flare of the imposter's energy stifled her emotions as they attempted to rage against him. Enough was said. Her tanned complexion returned as the chakra gradually faded. Fu's face showed disbelief as the mask broke. Amayuri was staring at the figure in front of her as well. He held her sword and looked at its previous location. The shirt was ripped, exposing a huge hole. Both women stammered, "Ho, how?" Chojuro, too, was awake to see the impossibility. Stark was aware that this would occur shortly, but time was of the essence. He zipped up his jacket and said, "Sigh, I don't feel like telling it right now." The first to settle down was Amayuri. She smiled resignedly. "All right then. Mei did the right thing to pit you against me. I wanted to face her though, but she wasn't into swords and she needed manjutsu more right now. I guess this is it." Stark gave a nod. "Yes, she specifically requested to disable you. Now stay put." She waited with her eyes closed. However, she reopened them without feeling anything when she heard someone being stabbed. She and the other two swords watched as Stark left. After she noticed her other sword next to her, she was furious with him for turning his back. "Why are you leaving? Have you felt regret?" He paused and looked back blankly. Amayuri's shocked expression prevented her from responding to the question. "Why have you?" The confrontation was unknown to the others. "Were you expecting a death wish? You hardly fought back against Fu." She broke contact as his gaze seemed to pierce her. The Espada said sarcastically, "Sigh, as much as I like to wait for your answer, but we must be going. Something tells me they need all the help they can get." As if to confirm it, they felt another strong wave sweep over them. "Blasted!" he exclaimed, turning away from its origin and speaking to his friends. "Fu, Chojuro, get a move on." The girl was worriedly unsure, but the boy asked, "What about you?" "I'll be fine." This was aimed more at Fu and partially succeeded. After exchanging a final glance, they both leapt in the direction of the source. "Now go. I'll catch up," they exclaimed. The Arankar looked back at the woman who had fallen. He felt that she should be aware of the depression. He walked away without noticing her shocked look. She could have, but she didn't want to. Not like this. She called herself a coward for doing so. XXXXX. He had no left arm. Damn it, he ain't holding back. He exclaimed. However, the missing appendage was gradually reformed by water rather than blood. As anticipated, Manjutsu scowled at his comrade with the eye patch next to him. "You sure there's something wrong with how he's beating us up?" "Positive. If it weren't for the Byakugan, I wouldn't have discerned that there's a foreign chakra in his system. If I hazard a guess, it could be influencing him like some sort of genjutsu." "Great," he said, gripping his sword, the Kabikirabocho, more tightly. The purpose of this specific squad was to take on the Mizukage. They are now on a shoreline that has been ruined. They lost 3 of their 12 best, and he, Tsurugi, and Mei were the only ones who had a chance. At least he had more control, so he wondered where the other Kiri Jinchuriki had disappeared to at moments like these. He pondered the location of his ancestors' clams. "Hey Mei. Congrats. Now we know that your bud isn't right in the head before he kills us." Mei pondered their dire situation, refusing to respond in return for a glare at her opponent now that he had released the power of his Biju. The Kyodai game no Sanbi. Victory was far off. His eyes and tone were dead. "Surrender. You have no chance against me." Her suspicion that Yagura was somehow manipulated was validated by this during their fight. He remained faceless while taking the lives of their allies. It was too much, but it would have made sense. They put up a fierce fight, but I did say that it was a do or die situation with determination. She thought, if I were to die, at least I did something about it. The others saw her and made a hand gesture, knowing that the fight would get even messier, so they stood ready. Before they could take action, the Sandy Holder released a thick mist that made everything around them much denser. They retreated to avoid it, but someone wasn't lucky. The monster in front of them just stared blankly. "Then you will die." XXXXX. What happened? The fog just thickened. And what is this feeling? Stark had managed to catch up to the two earlier, and they were on their way to the location where a sizable chakra source was emanating, when all of a sudden, Fu. Chojuro. Mei. He shouted softly because he thought this was the cause of the issue. Then he heard something behind him and the hollow wished he saw a boy left alone, the struggle to bear a burden he would know later in life, the betrayal of his friend, the light he unknowingly ignored, his death. This was Naruto's past, his past. It's just a memory, all an illusion. Stark tried in vain to convince himself. He also saw his loneliness, which followed him into the afterlife. And then he realized that he had failed to even keep Lilith safe. He couldn't take it any longer, and desperation crept into his mind. However, he grasped something, and without thinking, he looked down and saw the sword, the one that Lilith had given him. Go for it. Loss. Thump. No. RRRAAAWWWRRR. XXXXX. Note from the author. 1. Yes, I invented their epithets, and yes, I kept them alive. Unless you have a better one, I'll stick with it. Suggestions for the others are also welcome. 2. Jutsu. Haramekure unleashing Haramekure Kaiho. Doden. Earth-shaking palm Cheeto Yuhira Earth release. I made my own translation since I couldn't find one. Doden. Earth-style wall. Doryuheki Earth release. Lightning Fang Raiga Raiden. Ikazuki no Utage lightning release. Banquet of Lightning. Changed the lightning burial to this one. Raiden. Sandageto Thundergate lightning release. XXXXX was a required. During another team debriefing, a certain rebel leader thought, then again telling them what to do can be a chore. She let Ao take over because he had planned this specific operation. The role itself stands out to strengthen the resolve of its followers, so one must be strong to make the decisions for what is best for everyone, and to bear the trust worth following. Now the engagement. Engagement? I stopped writing. Many carriages has, squeezing harder, marriages? Land of honey, but moon, honey, moon. A pen snapped. Ow, the one-eyed spokesperson suddenly felt a sense of dread, and the others did too. Even the uninterested one sat up straight. Ao turned slowly to face his leader, and her overly warm smile sent shivers down his spine because of the gloomy vibe it seemed to radiate. Shut up, or I'll kill you, she said. Subconsciously, he whimpered, what did I do? It was decided to dismiss them in order to get away from whatever was bothering Mei. The others gladly followed, but one took his time. Apart from you, Stark, I want to talk about something. The person turned around and said, K, before casually taking back his seat. Although most people initially thought it was impolite, Mei eventually came to appreciate it as him being his own person. Despite his lanky appearance, he is polite enough, and because of the numerous successes he helped achieve, he also became dependable. Because of this jerk, their progress was delayed by a few more weeks rather than months, and it was just an added bonus that he is plain attractive. As she got up from her desk, she thought humorously, thank you for staying, even if you have other things to do, mostly sleeping. Yeah, he said as he watched her walk to the door and secure something, causing glowing inscriptions to briefly fly across the room. With a quiet voice that screamed, trouble, she explained, it's a silencing seal, hopefully to keep anything from leaking out. She looked back at him, and his mind began to ring with alarms. All right, did you need something? This time, he did a good job of masking his anxiety. With a quiet giggle, she walked slowly and swayed in his direction, saying, I'm glad you asked. Stark felt that his back was unsafe, so he had the chair turned to her. Now, she said, drawing that out too dramatically. I have a favor to ask. Every step she took was a step backward for him. Oh, don't worry, I scratch yours and you can. She made a slow hand gesture that broke the sweat dam. If it could be said once, it could be said again. Tear wasn't anything like this. He attempted to back the chair further, but the table had already struck the wall. He glanced back for a moment and realized that, because he was seated, he was eye level with the woman's greatest assets. Now if you want, she said, her face drawing closer, I can pay in advance. Words and brain activity gradually failed, leaving only enough to keep him alive. Ready to hit the instinct to run, she leaned over until she was eye level, which gave Stark an eyeful. She then lifted his chin and traced her fingers to bring him back to her playful eyes. He blinked perplexedly as her playfulness gave way to disappointment, and he watched as she sat down next to him before he could come up with a way out. Her eyes were blank, but Stark felt as though they were left in an awkward silence. She meant so much to you, right? She asked abruptly and solemnly. He wasn't sure what it was about because his brain was still healing from the meltdown. I'm sorry, but... Without missing a beat, she went on, whoever she is, she had an impact on you, even when you lost your memories. His story is about regaining his memories, and he could now understand who she was referring to. But when he met her apathetic gaze, he stopped. Now, why didn't you pursue her instead of joining us? From what I remembered, I don't think I deserved her. I held her back all this time. He thought morosely. She needed someone better, up until this point. He believed he needed time to reflect, so he gave what he believed was best. Who says? May decided to move on to the next topic by concluding this one, saying, all the more reasons for why we should win. And for you to stay alive. He couldn't respond to that because he didn't have the answer. It was an external conflict. He pondered, how did, as she rummaged through the stacks on the desk for something. Call me a romantic, and many of the refugee held those eyes. Her features took a melancholy turn as she revealed what she was discovering. Answers they wanted to know, but are too distant that they give up. Her laugh still sounded playful, but it somehow conveyed knowledge. How about you? Then, she gave him a folder, deciding that they could talk about his life later. I want answers. To her inquisitive gaze awaited his response, to which he nodded in order to proceed, but time is running out, which restricts what I want to know. With the skills you had displayed, and I hope there's more, I believe you are the best person to confront her. Ringo Amayuri, member of the 7 Shinobi Swordmen, and wielder of the Thunder Swords. Kiba. Was the biography that Stark read after opening the folder. May answered, left Kirigakure when the group were disbanded. Her melancholy deepened. Under unknown circumstances, killed Kurare Kushimaru and brought the Nuabari back to Yagura and became their general. The weight of each statement made Stark suspect something, but he won't press until she is prepared to face him about it. Everything he needed was there, except for the one question he had. What do you want done? She turned away from his eyes and said, me and my team will meet and try to take down Yagura. Then, attempting to maintain a determined front, she turned to face him and said, I want you to hinder or disable her. She is aware of what he meant when he left the sentence, and if she, unfinished. With regret, she inhaled and said, then do what you must. There was a lot of tension, but there was one last query. Why me? Mangetsu may have the skill, but he is needed in the team. She clarified the others are not appropriate for the sword style that leaves me because we, however, he stopped her with a raised hand, and he asked again with the same seriousness she had witnessed. Why me? I can't put my desire above others, she said, bowing her head as though embarrassed. I was admired by them and I can't let them down as a leader. He heard her voice crack a little as she said, but, I don't know. I can assign it to a more competent one, she said. She let a little stream pass before regaining her grip, wiping the dampness shamefully. But that doesn't excuse me from being a coward. I apologize, I looked so weak, didn't I? You don't require. The soft, caring side that he knows when to use, even if he wasn't aware of it, was the rarest tone she had ever heard from him. May. He grabbed her shoulder, making her feel secure. That is why you have comrades, those who you trust to help you. As a leader, there are times, decisions, tasks that, no matter what our expertise is, are our limits. Admitting one's weakness as a sign of strength is rare. Carefree smile always gave off the impression that he could be trusted, and once we learned from it, we know what can surpass it. She smiles as well and says, thank you. He just waved it off, don't mention it. Being in a brighter mood, she decided that there are works to be done, but she will uphold her end of the bargain. Some way. Once this is all over, don't hesitate for any favors. Yeah, sure. As he was heading towards the door, he halted. He gave her a deadpanned look. Was that stunt of yours necessary? Of course. Saying it with as much innocence that it became unbelievable. And why? He drew lead out, trying to look cute while seemingly pondering. Because, you're cute. A frightening force cleared the haze, revealing all the present combatants as well as some additions to aid their allies. Those who were caught in the mist's effect felt many unpleasant reminders of their past, but the sudden clearing brought them back, to witness something much worse in the present. If it was fear, many are familiar with it. Mangetsu was no exemption. It was fear when he faced Zabuza in his youth. It was fear when he was hunted during the bloodline purge. It was fear for the unknown of his brother Heck. This suicide mission of taking out Yagura has this qualification. It's through training and a goal that led him pushed past this. But this was not fear, this was despair. No one dare move, not even Yagura. His expressions were still blank, but his stance portrayed something desperate, like that of a cornered beast facing a far superior hunter. Its only course of action was to attack, or die trying. Both sides were open, but the fear of this greater threat prevented the action. This is amazing. An inferno burning brightly had pushed everyone to distance from it. Those who knew the source could only imagine how much power it had due to the bodies scattered around it. The rebels found it fortunate that all of it were the bodies of the enemies, but it never eased their being as the sensation to run was becoming more appealing. Only the Mizukage seemed to be able to withstand, if not barely, the proximity, though the distance was still great. The flames slowly condensed, many tensed as the figure was being revealed. XXXXX, so, I'm not dead, again. Stark believed he had when he looked up and saw a full moon shining above him instead of the eternal crescent, but when he looked up, he realized he wasn't in Hueco Mundo. The first thing he saw was sand. The Primera was perplexed by this because he knew that this was more of a Shinigami thing, but he thought back to when Aizen was building his army. The more sensible ones testified that they were in a place of chaos and emptiness before they emerged as Arankars, but he was a special case. He became an Arankar without the Haugoku. Anything else that was lost now that he was calm. Stark realized that unleashing his unstable power has something to do with this. When he finally saw the rock formations scattered across the landscape, Stark was drawn to the biggest one, which he climbed right away. Upon reaching the summit, he saw that it was a broad plateau with a raised platform in the center that was illuminated by the moon due to the surrounding rocks casting a shadow. However, his attention was drawn to a figure standing in the center, so he moved closer and got on the platform, where he was able to observe the details even though the figure's back was to him. He could say that it was a human-shaped hollow, as evidenced by the hole in the mask. It had pitch-black limbs that ended in sharp claws. It had gray, possibly silver fur on its arms and legs, but the way it moved animatedly even when no wind was blowing gave the impression that it was fire. It had a gray tail flowing behind it. It also had a flame-like appearance, but it was tangled or overlapped by more than one part, and it had small black spikes scattered on it. Overall, it appeared to be a more ragged and beastly form of his resurrection, which gave him clues that this was. The espada was a wolf hollow, so he wasn't surprised by its lupine features. 3 small black spikes on each side of its fanged muzzle gave it whisker-like features. Flame-like markings tinted the side of its eye and continued to an extension spiking back on its head. However, Stark finally realized that he only saw one of the last traits noted. It was fully facing him, shocking the Urakar of the discovery. It was missing its upper left portion of the mask, revealing a closed eye. The hollow winced and growled louder before he could think about it, turning its glare back to the moon, and Stark followed its gaze, shocked by what he saw. XXXXX Yagura launched a highly compressed ball of water, sending the figure flying at frightening speed before crashing into one of the wreckage scattered around the shore. The fire went out, leaving the battered body of Stark, who staggered to stand and glared back at his attacker. Those who knew him were afraid of the change, but not as much as Fu, who had known him longer than others. Even when he kept his secrets, she had seen him angry, but never like this. He was snarling, his features looking murderous. "I could have been a monster, and still can, Stark." It was more terrifying to watch as she realized how much truth that statement held as she whispered it, her eyes unconsciously getting wet. The gray fur extended around his collar. A large gray tail with black spikes hung behind him. His right arm was covered in gray fur that ended with a black clawed hand. The jaw necklace he always wore was now attached to his chin, and an incomplete white mask covered most of the right side of his face, leaving the rest to see his grimace. The dark yellow in a black abyss replaced the lazy blue eyes, and the hole in his chest was visible to everyone. Mangetsu said what everyone had in common. How the fuck? The crowd's distance was sufficient to shake them out of their daze, but the fear persisted. The hole goes everywhere. Al only caught a glance and quick deactivated the Byakugan due to the extreme pain. He felt that the eye would burst if he gazed a second longer. The power, it's too much. May trembled at the show as well, but she stood firm for her soldiers. It's a mystery how he could conceal such power. I'm hoping he's. Hold on a sec. Hole? Next. Mask. Mangetsu turned to face their leader in disbelief as he realized why all of these characteristics were familiar. You're telling me all those craps he sprouted were real? A larger water ball was thrown, traveling faster than the previous one, but it never reached him because Stark let out a powerful howl, dangerously flaring his aura as debris flew. Many felt exhausted and instantly fled to a much greater distance, while those with stronger wills watched as Stark made contact with the Jinchuriki, sending him flying across the landscape. When Stark grabbed hold of him and slammed him hard on the ground, he was stopped. Stark raised a claw, but Yagura roared, sending Stark off him. He straightened up, but the Sandy's holder was on him, bringing his fists crashing down and throwing up sand. He grabbed the swordsman's tail and slammed him against the rock cliff. A red blast threw him away before the Jinchuriki could continue the attack, but Stark was unable to move after he was surrounded by wires. A sizzle came from behind him. May and her group watched in horror as the explosion engulfed him. They could hear the jeers from Yagura's factions. The smoke subsided, along with their celebrations. Stark's already ragged clothes were the only thing ruffled as he glared up the cliff wall. His aura blazed even brighter. He roared and fired a red blast at the crag, crushing those who weren't killed by the pressure he flared. When a claw almost caught Stark, he appeared far away, only to be encircled by more of them, and he tore through the lines, connecting it to Yagura. The espada disappeared from his view. and the sand beholder was sent crashing to a destroyed building by a backhand. His left hand glowed red as he punched it away, but it was a distraction because Yagura appeared in front of him and delivered a punch, followed by a more powerful one. Those who were still near it instantly cleared when the wolf hollow pounced on him, but he was thrown aside when Yagura hit him with a large piece of debris. Stark managed to block it with his other arm, but it still sent him flying, so he stopped himself in midair, much to everyone's surprise given his fighting style. It's impossible to tell if Stark saw the corals beginning to encase his arm, but he suddenly appeared in front of Yagura, delivered a vicious left that sent him to the ground, and then brought down the other arm, slamming the coral and a piece of the shell with force. He grabbed one tail, as the Sandby had done earlier, and used its body to destroy a few pieces of debris, but he wasn't done yet, as he slammed him to the ground and threw the unfortunate body with a roar. Yagura crashed into a nearby port, where the building collapsed on him. Without waiting, Stark raised his right hand, and as it glowed blue, energy began to build up in front of it. They could sense the power's intensity as it quickly expanded, which only served to reinforce the sinister vibe it dangerously exuded. "Shit. Everyone, take cover," was heard when the gravity finally set in. Nobody wants to find out what will happen because it already felt so ominous. Eventually, a glowing orb appeared, and then it grew into a beam that was fired in Yagura's direction. Once it hit, it was disastrous, and the destruction continued, destroying everything behind the port and the other buildings. Many people who had been nearby to help Yagura were destroyed, and the rebels fled as far away as they could, only to turn around and see one of their own stumble. Ruka. They were startled when a person carrying her crashed in front of them, but their excitement increased when they realized who had saved their friend. Her teammates' shouts were ineffective due to the blast's roar, but they did see a blur in the middle of the flash. Aim, Amayuri. She stood up and didn't flinch when a blade was placed against her neck, and she watched with wide eyes as her unlikely savior set her down. "I'll give you a chance for saving my comrade. Give me one convincing explanation for why I shouldn't cut your throat right now," Mangetsu insisted. The swordswoman looked around until she found the person she was searching for, Redemption. Anger welled as he dug the blade deeper. That drew out a trickle. Some flinched, but it didn't change her neutrality. "I said believable, you snake." Stark was tearing through what was left, as if looking for something, and they could feel the burning even from this distance before she could deny it. A howl so empty chilled their hearts, and they looked back worriedly. "What's he doing?" One person spoke up, "His ability." With a look of horror on his face, Ao quickly turned off the Byakugan. "It's uncontrollable, it is growing in size." Chojuro announced a plan of action as everyone became alarmed. "We have to snap him out of it." "How?" "We're unable to approach him. He was difficult for Yagura and the Sandby to deal with." The group was beginning to feel panicked. "And let him be whole. More quickly than that bastard. He is bringing Kiri down." Mangetsu was aware of how dire their circumstances were, but he did it to protect his pupil. "Give me permission." They turned back to face Amayuri. "I resisted some of his strength. If I also make my Reigeki no Yoroi more intense, I might be able to match him." "WHO permitted you to do this?" Mangetsu countered. No one noticed how silent Fu was during their argument. "XXXXX. Please." It was only a whisper, echoing through a forest, with thick foliage above, but a few gaps let some light into a structure. A large group of trees, their branches overlapping to form a cage, and inside was a large figure. A monstrous beetle, whose distinctive features, a slender tail and 6 wings, were a representation of being inside his Jinchuriki, who was clinging to the prison bars in front of him. "Maggot. What?" Fu didn't like coming to see the source of her problems, and the few times she had been here had not been pleasant. However, after some lessons, mostly from Stark, she began to reconsider their circumstances, but now was not the time for that. I need your help. I am aware of what you will do. I take it has to do with that promise." Because the seal was imperfect, he was somewhat aware of what his host was doing. He nodded and said, "If I do become a monster again, promise me that you will stop me at all costs." Although he usually makes fun of her, the gravity of her request was not to be laughed at. "My chakra would be more detrimental than beneficial under your control, or lack thereof." "Then why go through all that?" the girl asked, her determination unwavering as she raised her head. "Additionally, avoid making the same promises twice." After some time, she closed her eyes in reflection and said, "Because he's just like me. We were harmed, we were by ourselves." However, her hard eyes softened slightly. "I'm no longer for me, for all of us. He was there. I made that promise for a loved one. He has changed since then. One of my bets is that he will cause more problems down the road." She regained her resolve, saying, "That won't stop me. Back then, I vowed to do everything in my power to support him, and I won't abandon him just yet." You were aware that you could die if you were left with just 5 tails? She might as well give up because she is prepared for rejection. That's why I'll help. It may be a long shot, but if you allow me to use 1 tail to stabilize the transformation, you using 4 can put you on even grounds with him, she said, watching in disbelief as the Bijou assumed a thinking pose with 1 leg under its purported chin. What do you say? Fu was unable to draw any conclusions from this after emerging from her daze. Why are you doing this? Well, maggot, I too made a promise, she said, not sure if it was possible, but the hard shell appeared to soften and a warm glow emanated from his eyes. I was asked to assist my next host by my previous one. Even though she had a difficult life, she managed to find the positive aspects of it. She has my respect and words for that. Fu knew what to do when the beetle's more flexible tail protruded. Thank you. She grinned and took it, but to make the transaction official, a few terms needed to be understood. And it's Fu, you dumb bug. The retort only made him laugh. Well, you're not a larva anymore. As the chakra glowed brightly, he too wanted to be identified. The name's Lucky 7. Shomei. Could have called you Caterpillar, but it's too long and grub sounds more like food. XXXXX. The battle to restrain their raging comrade continues to heat up, but Chojuro sensed a sudden heat nearby, and everyone was shocked when they realized where it was coming from. Fu. The girl is surrounded by a green chakra shroud, not another one. Al began to prepare the remaining restraining seals, but Amayuri stopped him, saying, wait, this one's different. It still had power, but it wasn't as malevolent as the previous release. Her skin didn't burn, but she could feel the strain as she continued to pour out more chakra. Eventually, the mask and shoulder armor formed, but 3 jointed spikes appeared on either side of her arm, then folded on each appendage to form bracers. Her legs were covered in a white substance that shaped like greaves, and finally, 4 insect wings emerged from her back. I don't know how long this will go on, therefore, the only piece of advice is to get out of there when you feel something is off, especially if it's more than normal. Right. She then quickly headed toward her target, and when Stark saw her, he swung. Fu deftly avoided it, but not before delivering a blow. Mushikui. She was more offended by his behavior than by the pressure he exuded, but she understood what it was like to lose control, so her current goal is to get him back or away from the others. She persisted in her attack, taking them back to the spot where he had fought the other Jinchuriki. The espada began firing, but Fu moved around them before he suddenly materialized above and pounded her. She tried to block with her arms, but she could feel the armor creaking as she was thrown back to earth. She regained her bearings and rolled away to avoid being trampled on, and Fu approached to use another variation of her distraction jutsu. Hiden. Mushikashu. Blowing small spark. It burned his face and disorienting him. I'm sorry, later, I apologize. Doden. Domu. Her fists became black and started hammering him while calling out to him with tears in her eyes. Stark. Please. Come on over, I'm back. When she saw Stark powering a bala and sending it towards her, her fist was caught, and the next thing she knew, the Jinchuriki was sent skidding towards the rock wall. The hit caused a cloud to form, which the predator stalked towards before it cleared to reveal nothing. The hollow looked around in confusion, but he heard a slight rumble, and then he saw a roundhouse that sent him flying back. Fu flew towards him again, snarling as he prepared another bala, but as he was about to shoot, she dug her hands on some debris in front of her and overturned it just in time to meet the shot because the blast was too close to him. Stark was also sent flying, but something wrapped around him, entangling his arms as well. Fu could feel his power ebbing her, but she managed to hold on with all her strength as her friend continued to flail. Please return. XXXXX. Stark was greatly distressed when he saw how much power his possessed body was releasing, fearing that his comrades would suffer the same fate as the Hollows before he met Aizen. If it could be compared, the battle inside was just as terrible as the battle outside. The moon was showing what was happening outside. When he realized that his Hollow side was in charge, he confronted it right away, learning that their strengths were equal. However, he was shocked to learn that any decisive blows were also felt in return. He watched the strikes the Hollow landed and discovered that it was also on the same boat. The Arankar understood that Hollows are primarily instinctual, so it fought without restraint and was stronger. It seems to know that they are connected because it left him battered on the floor while staring back at the moon. However, he was surprised when it continued to attack him, but it was still going strong. Was I too weak? Is this it? You are still my strength, Hinata? So please wait for me. I'm sorry, but it can't. Who says? May. I'll try my best to assist you. If you need anything, I'll be there for you. Fu. I don't allow my allies to perish. Who is that? Fighting is your only option if you don't want to lose any of your allies. Lilynet, he said, stumbling to his feet as he realized that people still had hope for him. When a person has something important they want to protect, that's when they can become truly strong. Haku. Stark stumbled to his feet and fortified himself. "I never break a promise, so I won't flee, Naruto," was his last blow as he tackled his opponent, causing them to struggle and roll off the edge. After landing on his back, the Hollow attempted to stand up, but Stark retaliated with a glare that was equally intense, and the two of them stared at each other before the Hollow growled in defiance of his action. With a tone of authority never heard before, the Primera declared, "I will. If you push me, I'll protect them, even if it kills me. I might not keep my word, but if it means they'll have one less issue to handle, then so be it." Stark was startled when a white-gloved hand suddenly grasped the hilt. He turned to face whoever it was, only to be struck hard and lose consciousness after seeing only a hazy white image. XXXXX. Even though Fu was already having difficulty holding on, her strength was gradually ebbing away. However, Stark let out a human-sounding yell, and he began to calm down eventually. Only the jawbone and the hole were left, and a panting Stark turned to face his rescuer. "Thanks." When the others finally caught up to them, the scene was as follows. Fu was having difficulty speaking, so she was hugging him and burying her head to muffle the sniffle, which was the only way she could show her happiness. He knew how close he was to killing them, and he lowered his head in shame, knowing that there was no other way to say it. "I'm sorry. You should be." May's stern gaze persisted until Stark suddenly felt a sharp pain in his stomach as he watched her hop on one foot. After regaining his composure, she began scolding him, saying, "You got lost and had us worried." He tried to make sense of everything after being shocked by her reprimands, but I almost. The mass watched in horror as the full release of the Sanbi was revealed, but he was interrupted when the tides abruptly rose and an island slowly rose out of the ocean. "You must be kidding me." The giant head looked around the crowd until he noticed something strange, but they all understood that Yagura must have escaped through the ocean and waited while he recovered. "Amayuri, why do you support the enemy?" Everyone tensed and readied their weapons for the unexpected as she moved forward. "Yagura. This must end. This was completely unanticipated. This is not the future we had in mind." She pointed her sword and was covered in lightning. "My brother, you are the Mizukage, but I fought for Kiri. If I have to kill you to keep you safe, then so be it." He then lowered his claw and said, "Then die as a traitor." "What's fresh?" was heard before the hand landed where she stood. May was worried before she saw the swordswoman racing up the arm she had to evade as a tail nearly swept her, but the other one caught her as she was flung back to shore. A large shadow appeared above her as a claw descended, but she was dragged away in the nick of time. The Sanbi failed to notice something coming from its blind spot. Haramekure Kaiho. Who saved her? Surprised the swordswoman, May. "I don't know what may happen next," she said with a slight smile, "but let's fight together, just like we used to, in the interim." Amayuri felt lifted. She couldn't believe her old ally friend could trust her. She too didn't know what may happen, but she will make the best of what it was worth. She nodded as they both charged to join the others. "May. Hit me. Sweden. Suiryuden no Jutsu," she yelled as she formed a chain of seals. The hydrification jutsu allowed Manjetsu to meld with the dragon, allowing him to freely control it. With the Kabikirabocho protruding from its head, the two titans engaged in combat as the others joined in the attack. A massive dragon of water surged towards Manjetsu, which would have taken damage to anyone else. Stark saw that Fu was still wearing the chakra cloak, but she was dazed. "Fu." Stark noticed that two remained back, both weakened by their previous deeds. But for some strange reason, the girl didn't hear him. She was certain that she had never heard the voice in her head before. "Please, someone, stop. What was that? The other Jinchuriki is here. He needs assistance." "But how is this? Even in our prison, the Bijus are able to communicate with one another. However, if both links are available, the host may also be heard." She stumbled and leaned against Stark, who was looking at her worriedly. "Stark, we need to help him," she said. "He lacks authority." He attested to that rather than fleeing when he had the opportunity. Yagura remained to complete them. Everyone was thrown back to shore by a roar. There were no casualties yet, but the injuries were severe, and the fact that someone else was arguing didn't help either. "Hey, boy," I said, "launch me now." "Be you, however, I can't simply strike you. Consider it as striking your adversary, but right now, you're not." Amayuri was about to reprimand him further when she felt a tug behind her clothing and heard the words, "Happy landing." A few seconds later, she was flying in the direction of the enormous turtle, and everyone around her watched in disbelief at such a careless move. Manjetsu simply gave Stark an approving glance and said, "I wanted to do that though." The Primera stared intently at the battle, flexed his hand, and tried to assess how he was doing. He could feel the fluctuations again, but there was no time for that as the dragon-shaped lightning was knocked away. He appeared before Yagura and sent a bala towards the eye. It was slower because the turtle was able to move his head AWY. A water ball sped towards him. His sonito couldn't function right away, so he braced himself. Kaiho Haramekare. Doden. Doryuheki. Sweden. Sujinchu. He saw that Chojuro had created a large shield, Fu had built an earth wall, and he surmised that Mei had called out that water jutsu. The impact caused a slight tremor, but the wall withstood it. "Are you attempting to murder yourself once more?" Mei scolded him. "I was trying to help from what I can see, you need a lot of it." "Yes. But you're no exemption." Fu shot back. Chojuro confirmed. "We got each other's back because we are your allies." They watched in horror as the Sanbi gathered energy, and the moment was broken by a growing pressure. A Bijudama is being prepared by him. If it hits, he will destroy Kiri. "We must quit it. Ow, Mangetsu, move out of the way." They all turned to watch Stark gather his own energy, repeating the same attack that destroyed the port because the Hollow wasn't sure how long it would take to generate a full Sero. With his instability and all, he chose to focus on the quality of the blast rather than the quantity of time. The crowd was terrified of the repetition and immediately followed his instructions, while some people watched in concern as blood gushed from his hand. This one was more controlled and claimed that he was the one aiming, but as the power increased quickly, it began to distort and exhibit signs of instability as a result. It was uncontrollable and felt unfinished, and he had no time to think about the issue because a larger one was getting ready to launch his. "Recover. And get covered." Yagura shot his ball of destruction barely after he had given the order, "Bijudama." "Here's mine," said Grand Rei Sero. This moved as though it had its own life. Unlike a beam, it spun like a razor and sliced through the ground. When the two forces collided, it was like hell breaking loose, and everyone sought cover or made their own to avoid being collateral damage. It felt like forever till things seemed to calm down, but it took another minute to decide it was safe to look. They began to wonder what had happened to Stark when they peered out into a large clearing that resembled a desert and noticed the swordsman standing beneath the Sanbi. His blade stabbed into it, as someone pointed out at sea. XXXXX roaring could be heard amongst the loud crashing of waves against a lagoon. It echoed from a cave connected to it, where the thrashing of chains could also be heard. On top of it were two figures. One was standing up and held a sword, while the other was bound by a chain around his neck. "You are my executioner." Then, in stark contrast to what Stark had heard about him, Yagura said calmly, "It's great to finally meet you. I'll tell you now that I hate the word deathblow." That remark only made the Jinchuriki laugh. But you must, if you want to end all this." "But this wasn't what you were doing," the Arankar said. Penetrating his facade of composure, he tried to think. "You were under control." He had shadows over his eyes, perhaps, but too much has already been done. The two fell silent, and the roaring stopped as well. "Even though I don't deserve it, may I ask you for a favor before you murder me?" Stark was about to reprimand his despair. Just as he looked up, he had a resigned smile. Stark felt a sudden pain, but hid the grimace to let him continue. "Please protect them for me." Yagura raised the sword and closed his eyes solemnly, waiting for the death blow. While Stark tightened his grip on both his sword and his head, the pain was growing, and he knew he would faint soon, but he had to do it first. XXXXX. Impossible. A shadow voiced in the dark. "The plan must commence." XXXXX. Note from the author. This has got to be the longest. The manga's forward motion and the anime's decision to finally give the characters some personality didn't help. Feel free to review. 1. Jutsu. Yoroi Reijeki Lightning Strike Armor. Bug Bite Mushikui Haiden. Bug Burn Haiden. Mushikashu, made it up. Earth Release. Earth Spear Doden. Domu Sweden. Water Release. Water Dragon Bullet Technique Suiryuden no Jutsu. Sweden. Sujinchu Water Encampment Pillar Water Release. XXXXX Weapon 101. Is he intoxicated? Conflicts can occasionally be a hindrance in a team. There are a number of ways to resolve them, one of which is shown during a mealtime. Training was completed, but Fu wasn't. She was glaring at a fidgeting Chojuro while Isaribi was preparing some of her catch. "I apologize. At the time, I believed you were prepared." Fu's first attempt at building an earth wall had literally collapsed, so it was a good thing she had a hard head because things would have gotten serious. She only complained as she dug into the fish. The most composed of the three chooses to switch the topic because he is sick of it. What was Stark doing back there at the beach? As she was leaving with her net of fish, she noticed the man. Isaribi was about to inquire when Fu finally said something understandable, probably trying to fix one of his techniques. They looked up to see the errant swordsman coming toward them. "Stark." They chanted. He simply nodded and joined them in sitting on a log. "So, did it succeed?" "Close, but still a bum." Well, you mentioned that your allies made certain motions to activate it having a sword that can form any shape. Shojiro likely knew what he was saying when Jin asked him what pose he used to shoot a Sero. He replied that he used the less problematic one. However, given the Hollow's current issue, he tried to recall who had the second less problematic pose to perform. He decided later and concentrated on Fu. How was your training, then? The cause tried to apologize again, but the girl glared back at him, and the other two sighed at the screen, saying, I guess not. The Primera, however, had a more somber look on his face. How was your other training? They all fell silent. It took time to get used to the fact that Fu was holding a bijou for the time being. Stark advised her to try to talk to her tenant. Well, she searched for the right words to express her development, but it doesn't appeal to me. It's cruel and keeps referring to me as maggot. Why must I deal with that? The distaste was heavily layered. After giving her outburst some thought, Stark calmly responded, well, to probably ask for its assistance. She looked at him incredulously. Why? Because it is dangerous as a weapon, wasn't it, Cage? He decided to get creative and began massaging the looming headache. The swordsman displayed the katana to everyone, asking, is it dangerous to have this sword in its sheath? No, whack. It was a serious blow, but fortunately she had a hard head. Fu gripped her head and muttered curses. Wrong, I could break something if I used more force. Stark then set the sword on the ground. Now with this sword here, is it dangerous? Fearing punishment, the girl hesitated. Yes? Fu repeated her earlier antics, and Stark flicked her forehead with a little force. Wrong at worst, it will only be an annoyance if you leave it alone. After they had all calmed down, he said, now tell me, what did both scenarios have in common? He turned to his fellow swordsman because no one knew how to respond. Sighed Shojiro, what is a sword? It is an extension, he said, realizing that it was more than just a weapon because he is also one, of course. The one with the weapon. As the listener's comprehension set in, Stark nodded. Yes, the weapon is not to be feared. The wielder should be feared because it is through them that the weapon is used for their desire. Fu's quiet contemplation indicated that his words had an effect, but if he caught her attention, she might think more. There are warriors from my hometown who make their weapons out of their very souls. It was fascinating to learn about someone who wielded a sentient sword. The only Hada was the only one they had heard of, but wielding them was not easy, even to their master. Every sword is unique because the spirit that resides in it came from their master. Everyone was enthralled, but Shojiro particularly, so they must demonstrate that they are deserving of their authority. If everything goes according to plan, their relationships get stronger over time to the extent that they now fight as allies and equals rather than as masters or servants. Wow, what were they like? Shojiro asked eagerly. However, Stark's solemn demeanor gradually increased the tension. They were interesting, similar to you. He grasped the remnant of what he had become and said, you see, the only description was that we were monsters. They gasped. But let's say my kind were at war with them. All of us died and reincarnated as chaotic, sorrowful beings. We lost a lot. Most importantly, we lost our hearts, along with our history, identity, and some of their sanity. This was the closest Stark could get to describing who he truly is. In return, we hid behind a mask and turned into monsters to fill the void in our hearts. We thought we found freedom through someone. He recalled when Aizen promised to end his loneliness, but at that point, we were only going to die. I apologize for this, Stark said, realizing that the atmosphere had deteriorated. Is it okay if I leave this? Isaribi gave him a couple as he stood up. Before he left, he looked back at Fu. Hey Fu, would you mind doing me a favor? Fu eagerly seizes the chance to encourage him, saying, I'll try my best to assist you. If you need anything, you can rely on me. She looked a lot like Lilynet in Naruto, and Stark grinned. If I do become a monster again, promise me, she said, tensing as she realized where this was going. That you will stop me at all costs. I'll do my best. Fu was unsure and scared to respond, so she looked into his eyes, which were waiting for her response, if not begging for it. The final words they heard before he vanished were, thanks, Fu, and napping. They don't say anything. The other passengers turned to face his traveling companion. Did he mean what he said? Being a gentle soul. Isaribi's was already shedding tears when he first met Stark. She insisted she was a monster. His reply was that he had met real monsters and she wasn't even close to the description. Fu sighed and said, he still harbors secrets about his past. Heck, I thought it was so bad for him to talk like that. Shojiro too was disturbed by the enigma. Will he be alright? Maybe, I don't know, but I made a promise that I will be there to help him. Everyone agreed to that. XXXXX a long way away. Gosh. I felt I heard enough stories from the drunks, said Hazuka, who is still alive today. What made me a part of this? A veteran with one eye complained. To secure the perimeter, we need a sensor, he called back Tao. Additionally, keep us hidden. However, the sensor was focused on something else when Mangetsu turned to look behind him. I think Stark knows we're here. What? He just waved in our general direction and I know there isn't anyone else there. So much for hidden and secured, I said, palming my face. He's not too privy, at least he might have a talent for teaching, you have to admit. Then they heard a sniffle, and when they turned to look behind them, they saw their leader sobbing uncontrollably, makeup streaming down her face. Hey, Mei. What provides? It's so tragic that it makes sense why he appeared so lonely. Waahh. Yeah, heard every variation. Darn drama queen. He saw that Mei had dropped a notebook, so he picked it up and read. Hid under a maw, what the hell? Have you noted it? He chose to overlook her peculiarity and overheard her say something about requesting permission for a book. It was so sad, yet beautiful. I must have it recorded. Mei snatched back her notes and stuffed them in her pocket, the one in front of her. Past, it may carry age, was another tirade he could hear from Ao. Shit. Damn you, Ao. Snap in a sad way. He wasn't alone here, but after everything he had been through, it didn't matter that this was the last thing he saw before death's doorstep. But because of a newcomer, everything was quiet. He was used to seeing only two sides of the familiar masked shinobi in front of him. The mask was unable to conceal the emotions that were erupting in waves, and the loose, sagging posture was a far cry from the man who confronted the most dangerous. I really am a scum to think that I disregarded my own rule. I never imagined that I would live long enough to break the one for the Chidori. I'll admit that I didn't pay attention to you. It's not that you were worthless, on the contrary. You were the most valuable person that was entrusted to me. I thought you were a strong person who never gave up and stood tall in the face of adversity. I genuinely thought you were capable of surpassing everything. Pride. However, I was never able to see past your mask. Isn't that ironic? From someone who has always worn one? I feel guilty. Sigh. Talk about looking underneath the underneath. Naruto, even though I have no right, I apologize for a lot of things, including leaving you. I would have liked to, but there was no safe way. It was hanging, but he knows what might have happened. For the last time, for all that is worth, I'm sorry. This is the only chance to see you again. Sincerity. Hey, sensei, if I don't deserve a favor, can I still ask for it? He can almost feel his excitement because he thinks this one wish will be fulfilled. His mismatched eyes came back to life, but they also turned steel with determination. With a small but genuine smile, he finally raised his head and said, please protect them for me. It was his last time in this realm. XXXXX. After thinking about other aspects of his past, he made the decision to take action regarding the present. Stark groaned as he got up from his resting place and attempted to remember what had happened. It was clear that the slight uneasiness he was still experiencing was related to his encounter with Yagura, and the fact that he was in a clean room and saw people working on various construction projects outside the window suggested that their side had prevailed. The Hollow lamented, were they right of what I am? A decision occurred to him, but the Espada of Solitude knew that he would not be the only one to suffer, so it was for the best. However, regret over how close it was to tipping the scale because of him. The Primera hurriedly changed after noticing some folded clothing next to his bed. His shoes were the same, and they even replaced his gloves and sash. The only difference was that his hakama was now black, and he was wearing a black button-up shirt. How considerate of them, even though I feel like a Shinigami, he thought, and hurriedly put on the white jacket, ignoring the back markings. He finished the last piece of clothing, opened the window, and was about to leave when he noticed something on the table. He wondered how lost he had been to even forget that he felt the sword was much lighter, and when he unsheathed it, he discovered that half of the blade had been snapped off. After securing it, he turned to face the exit, but before he could react, the door flew open due to some presences swiftly approaching his room. Stark was startled to see the group, but his attention was diverted from the familiar faces to the leader, whose face displayed a range of emotions that left him perplexed. Relief, shock, hurt, and, after a brief pause, anger. You're going to leave? He didn't respond because he was thrown against the wall, and Fu got on top of him and began punching him. It was more of a statement than a question, and he suspected she saw the open window and came to that conclusion. Stark didn't bother to stop her. Why? Why abandon us? Why do you leave me? She continued to beat him, progressively weakening with each blow until the girl was too weak to stand. You could have at least got me to come with you, she choked out. Even his Hiero was powerless to stop the crushing pain he was experiencing. He turned away to avoid witnessing this terrible scene, saying, you don't deserve to be with a monster. However, the Arankar was abruptly raised by the collar and made eye contact, which brought back memories of their first encounter. but this time it was more different. I myself had been referred to as one. That implies that we should be among our kind, doesn't it? They returned to the crowd, which was now led by May, after saying, I have to agree with her, though only a part. You belong with your kind, she said gravely, and Stark managed to stand up as Fu let him go in disbelief. He was beginning to lose hope until May grinned at them. And that is with us. Startled by this, he quickly recalled why he had left early. But I almost killed you all. What would prevent me from doing it once more? With a hint of fear mixed in with the query. Chojuro said, your comrades. This put an end to his outbursts. I speak for the group to admit that you were terrifying out there, but that doesn't change who you are to us, May said, indicating that this was a sign to continue. After hearing a chorus of agreement, the Arankar analyzed each person's expression and concluded that they were sincere. We all have our monsters that we have to face someday. You are the lazy bum who we can put our trust to watch over the pack. Even though they may be personal, remember that you are not the only one dealing with them, and we'll do everything in our power to assist you. You allowed Fu to promise that, didn't you? Even from someone as nice as Isaribi, the Hollow couldn't handle it. But consider this. What am I if you are a monster? Surprised by the voice, he trailed it to a small hooded figure by taking it off. It revealed the mellowed face of the Yondaime Mizukage. Hello, I would say that now is the best time to send my regards. How are you doing? A raised eyebrow interrupted the swordsman, alive. Yes, you did. However, the former Cage also cut him off, saying, no, I am aware of that. How are you able to move freely around here? I may be walking, but not as freely as you think, he said, laughing at his forwardness. Several suppression seals have been applied to me in order to prevent the others from being overpowered. The Hunter Division also positioned a net seal, which puts strain on the Sanbi's chakra. Manjetsu-san then created a modified version of one that would kill for insurance. Stop being so damned happy about dying. Manjetsu reprimanded him. His eyes, which were still composed, reflected the melancholy tone of his question. What better release is more fitting after all I have done? The silence was growing unsettling, and Stark just stared back. You asked me to make a promise. I say. Do it yourself. Yagura, who is fascinated by his direction, is the only one who understands what he is saying. It cannot be ignored that you were controlled, however, you must compensate for it. How so, considering that I betrayed Kiri whether voluntarily or not? I think death is a good option. The Sanbi container, staring directly into his eyes, is reminded of his sister's account of their encounter. If you want redemption, do one that could be more helpful, and by the look of this, they need all the help that they can get. Do you cherish your village? Then fulfill the true purpose of a Jinchuriki. No, fulfill your purpose as a shinobi, Stark added, nodding. Use your life to defend the things you value most. Oh, how? Yagura asked. I take it that only we know what your actual status is. Then do it as a shinobi, May said, nodding. Almost everything you did was done in secret. Yagura laughed, breaking the silence. Sigh, you were right, May, she said. It did sound reasonable to him. The lighthearted response was, told you. But the former Mizukage turned serious as he gazed back at his savior. But I am curious, how do you know so much of these? Without saying anything, Stark unbuttoned the shirt. The women would have blushed if they weren't unsettled by the hole through his chest. Better get comfortable, this is gonna take a while. And it was finally then that he realized how spacious his living quarter was. He told his life, or afterlife, as Coyote Starrk to the best of his ability, telling them everything he could remember as Uzumaki Naruto. No matter how absurd or fantastical it sounded, he kept some details for himself, but he gave enough to satisfy them, or at least confuse them enough that they wouldn't ask for more information. The few exceptions had a serious expression after he finished, but Stark could tell the tension was there, or perhaps it was from the more animated ones. It's official. Many people agreed with the statement. I haven't heard enough from the drunks. That's really hard to take in, he sighed, finding it hard to believe this as well. I understand, consider it a form of jutsu that revived me, and then go on. Not at all. The fact that after all they have done to you, that village is still standing, Fu protested, shattering a table before turning to face him with barely restrained rage. She can now relate to him at last, but his was too extreme. Yes, she was despised, but they were somewhat polite. Leave her alone. And the same will happen. We take good care of our weapons, even though we are the hidden village of the Bloody Mist. That might have sounded callous, but Stark knew what a swordsman thought. If you failed a mission, I can understand, but actually doing it, then they have the audacity to call you a monster. Yagura had at least shown some rationality. Even when he was out of control, the rational side cursed them for destroying such a valuable asset. But that doesn't mean he can't empathize. He too had his struggles, and it enrages and saddens him to meet others who are similar to him, only for the worse. I don't know for all of you, but I'll admit that it is very difficult to understand all this, especially who you were. Stark wanted to get involved, but so I'll stick to who you are now. Like we said, you are still the lazy bum revered as one of the heroes to save Kirigakure. Stark couldn't explain the warm feeling he had when he heard that, remembering how his other self had shed blood, sweat, and tears for such acknowledgement now. It was difficult to explain, so the Primera fought for his happiness. How can we not be grateful after all you have done? May said, raising a hand to stop his interruption. Everyone concurred, and the more intimate ones encouraged him, which made him feel more uneasy. You have our assurance that your secret will be safe. May stood in front of him, but the conversation fell silent, and for that, we will also offer you a safe haven here, she said, holding out her hand. You can begin again. Are you going to agree? She offered. Stark was unable to recognize the optimism that permeated the question. Thank you for the offer, he said, shaking his head as he took her hand, but he can now do so in a more positive way. But if you need help, don't hesitate to ask, but I still have to leave. Very well. Despite being disappointed, for a variety of reasons, May smiled and said, but know that the gates of Kirigakure will always be open for you and those with you. She had no right to stop him from his quest after hearing his story. The others quickly followed. At least get out there and show them your ugly mug. Mangetsu grabbed him from the back and dragged him out of his room, saying, we'll even show you the gate. Let them see who has the best dog. He was too busy trying to get back on his feet to bother to respond. 3 of them stood back as they all filed out, and the 2 former opposing leaders looked anxiously at one who was wearing a familiar mask because she couldn't allow anyone to see her weakness in her last moments. They wouldn't have cared because they were willing to let down theirs. Are you certain of this? The once hardened tyrant asks in a voice that expresses all of his feelings that are too strong to express in a brief sentence. Yes, was her hushed response. He gave her a brief but firm hug, accepting a fate he wished he could share. I guess this is it then. He let go and said, I'm sorry I can't be there. She was enveloped in another embrace from behind, but I will. The mask helped her hide the tears, but it was shared as she felt something wet on her hair. No matter what happens, we love you, Imouto. I love you too. Thank you. Mei Nichan Yagura ni. XXXXX. The town came to a halt as everyone watched the person who was the talk of the town. Depending on who he saw, Stark saw a wide range of emotions. The familiar faces ranged from admiration to respect and a little apprehension, which he judged based on where they were in the war. Those who weren't were intimidated, and he can't blame them because of the flimsy rumors that he went toe-to-toe with Yagura. If only they knew. And all this attention was making the Arankar feel self-conscious. The sight of the gate was a mix of greetings and farewells. Stark Dono. They abruptly stopped talking when he recognizes the voice. When he turned around, he saw Amayuri kneeling a few distances ahead of her, wearing a mask and the kiba. What are you doing? As Mangetsu watched in disbelief, she responded, she challenged him, didn't she? With caution, the Espada turned to face his guide and said, she did, but Kiri. We've got an issue. Everyone, including himself, was alarmed by his outburst. What's going on? The prodigy of the 7 calmed himself before starting the talk, saying, she decided to fight as an old-fashioned swordsman. It was an honorable death match between 2 blades and the wielder's skills. According to local tradition, the samurai tradition was changed by the first 7, but it still carries the associated honor. Only the most adept will ultimately emerge from the conflict with both honor and life intact. But we didn't finish it. However, he feels that he ought to have, since Mangetsu is currently looking extremely deranged. And that's what makes things more difficult. This would be a typical instance of getting back at you in the future if you had been a shinobi. He spoke as though discussing the weather. How can that prove that I won? After that stab, she would have won if it had been any other case. The Espada countered, describing the events as though they occurred every day. She finally said, the standards and beliefs may differ, diverting their focus from one another, but samurai and shinobi share a commonality. We fight with what we have. We put everything we've got into every fight. Anything we contribute has the potential to influence the outcome of the conflict. We battle with our spirit, our blood, and our goal. We fight with everything we have. She spoke with such conviction that the audience was captivated. The swordswoman bowed her head and said, and your blade was heavier compared to mine, even if you haven't used the hidden one. Her voice was soft this time, expressing her submission. Mangetsu sighed at this development and picked up where he left off, saying, if both fighters survive, it's either their equal strength or only that the superior one spared the other. However, she recognizes your superiority, so the latter is true. Then he confronted Stark, which made the situation even more dire. She is very serious by publicly declaring her submission and calling us as witnesses. She owes Stark her life for what he did for her, but owing it for servitude. She may not like the woman, but this worried her so much that it even stunned Fu. Seeing the inner turmoil he is facing, the Hazuka heir decided to help a bit. If it will help you sleep better, think of something for the life in your hand before she takes it away with her own. Yagura's true status was kept hidden, so he found a form of redemption while saving his life, but her predicament was just complicated. He now holds her life, and it was very unnerving. Mei had turned away after talking highly of her when permitted. This wasn't a case of abandonment, this was Amayuri's decision, this was her redemption. Looking at her once more, Stark realized how much remorse she is feeling. She not only betrayed her comrades, she had betrayed herself. She had no one to turn to in the past, and now, she is still lost. Stealing his features, the Primera knows what to do. Do you see me as your better? Yes, was her prompt reply, and what I say comes to pass. There was a moment of silence, and then the Serpent of the Mist said, I will obey. He ordered, discard your title. A lot of people were shocked, but not surprised. I deserved it after all. And get a new one. She had to accept her new fate before she could die with dignity, which was preferable to living in shame. Your goal was misplaced, but your intentions were clear. He approached her slowly and continued his declaration. Continue to fight, not to betray but to protect. She was shocked by this and quickly looked wide-eyed at her superior. Others were also stunned. But the wolf persisted now. Stand as a guardian rather than a snake. Because of your past, I no doubt that it would be difficult, Stark said, kneeling and holding her shoulders as she was too shaken to obey that final command, but I think you'll get through it. She had never left his gaze. He was the one who endured adversity while watching with compassion. The Primera stood up and looked at the crowd, pulsing a little of his Ryotsu to convey his message, but he didn't notice the tears that were dripping as Mei embraced her, her face tearing up with relief. So protect those you treasure against the upcoming storm, as the dragon tempest. If she wanted redemption, it wouldn't be through him. It may be a cheap shot, but by granting her a new purpose, she is now given a new purpose. He beckoned Fu to move on, choosing to capitalize on the stunned atmosphere. Where are we going now? Given how quiet it was, he might as well have yelled, I wish to visit a friend in Sanagakure. The word, wish, was not missed, and Fu understood what it meant. We're going to get lost again, aren't we? Hold on. Fu was annoyed that the same person had stopped him a second time. Now what? They were overtaken by Amayuri, who said, I know how to get to Suna. Let me accompany you, please. With a sigh, Stark turned back to the suddenly eager swordswoman and said, Oh brother, wouldn't this cause problem? On the contrary, her service would greatly contribute. Kiri, if she succeeds, despite her uncertain appearance, she was saved by her sister. What? However, Mei disregarded him and walked over to Amayuri, who straightened up because of the air of authority she exuded. Amayuri Ringo, in my capacity as Kirigakure's acting leader, I hereby declare the outcome of your behavior. Your assistance in defeating the late Yondaime Mizukage was acknowledged. Despite the fact that you were charged for it, you had defended Kirigakure. This mission will put your genuine loyalty to the test. In an authoritative voice, she ordered, you are to be sent as an agent to offer an alliance with Sanagakure. The newly titled dragon said with a firm bow, her hair concealing the slight smile, understood. But understand this. The seal that Mangetsu placed on you would be triggered if ever you dare betray us once again. She threatened, or so most people believed, and the quick wink was enough to confirm it. Behave, the Espada told a fuming Fu as the envoy now strode towards the pair, sighing since he didn't have much say in this. It was a mission, so who was he to stop her? That and getting lost sounded more problematic. So, should we wait while you pack? Shaking her head, the Kiba vanished in a plume of smoke. I already have what I needed, as she secured the mask on her face. Finally agreeing to this, I have a way to get somewhere fast, but I'm not sure how it will work on you too, so hold on tight. A bluish radiance engulfed the two females, but something frightened the crowd when a rip appeared in front of them, leading to a dark tunnel. Before anyone could react, Stark and his two shocked friends vanished into the hole that closed behind them. XXXXX Tamari may not be very superstitious, but everything lately made her feel uneasy. It had been a day since she left that village. She had put up with every visit because she had a friend there, and she worries every time she leaves, but this time it was more of a sense of dread. Tamari left knowing that her fate would be sealed in 3 days. Enough time to tell Gaara the bad news. She might as well mark the calendar because of the cracked cup and the dark clouds hanging overhead, which made her leave the dango shop right away. But what's happening now is really amazing. Suddenly, and possibly, a mouth opened into a cold abyss, and a stranger with 2 terrified girls. Or at least she thought both were, because one was wearing a mask, clung securely to him and his expression. He winced as their grip appeared to cut off his air supply, and the Arankar pondered what had happened to his Hiero. Well, I did ask for it. Let's avoid doing that again, please never. Amayuri didn't try to hide her fear. I agree with that. If she didn't like to agree with her, Fu would have placed third. Alright, relax please. Yes, it was frightening, but why didn't you use it to get anywhere? She scowled at him after he gasped as he attempted to escape their death grips after allowing them some time to gather themselves. Fu kicked his shin, causing them to both hop on one foot. What use is it if I don't know where? Stark scowled at her for the agony. The closest store I can recall that leads to anywhere was the one over there. Then, speaking to their new travel partner, he says, now, indicate Suna's direction, I'll take care of. Hold on. As the Suna Kunoichi drew closer, the Arankar abruptly reverted to a neutral front as they turned to face the person who had called them. What business do you have in Sanagakure? We serve as the representatives of Mizugakure, Amayuri said. Deciding that she would be the one to confront her after observing the slight shift in his behavior, we would like to discuss forming an alliance between our villages with the Kazekage. Tamari became stiff for some reason when Stark said, but more importantly, we wish to share information concerning the safety of your Jinchuriki. What makes it more significant? Her hands moved slightly closer to a weapon as she spoke softly. He was in a panic inside, but he was saved right away, because I am one. The Suna Kunoichi were shocked by Fu's response. Amayuri went on, hopefully this would be advantageous for the both of us. Tamari took this in and complied. Excellent, I'll take you out. Stark noticed the urgency and couldn't help but feel uneasy, but we have to get going now. I have a method. Tamari was more adamant, saying, it will take a day or two depending on the conditions. Amayuri read his body language and braced herself as the espada grabbed on the back of her clothes. So get on and hold tight, he commanded, which Fu eagerly got on one shoulder. However, he quickly gained traction. The sly warning before they disappeared was, hope you can hold in your lunch. XXXXX. Everything was in disarray following last night's attack. All of the shinobi with the physical capacity were running around doing everything from securing the village's defenses to aiding the injured, but the biggest catastrophe was the kidnapping of their leader. Others appeared in the entrance and got ready for the intruder, but not because they saw one of their own in the group. Baki was alerted by a sudden sandstorm and promptly took up arms. It also baffled them that she was the only one who appeared ill. Amayuri may be swaying, but she's doing better because she fought him at a similar pace. The man's pathetic apology, sorry, but you did want to hurry. He didn't have to guess that it was her first time traveling at such a speed and that he was the only one to blame because Fu had traveled this way and after a few nauseating complaints, developed a thrill for it. What was that? She heaved in an attempt to calm her stomach. Tamari-san. Ignoring the discomfort, Tamari looked towards them, but she also caught sight of the destructions behind them. Baki-sensei, what took place? They currently have Gaara after her former sensei briefs her about the attack and the two attackers, which startled the group and upset Stark. Amayuri's barely controlled aggression began when they described one of the intruders, and he knows where this leads. Stark was getting agitated because he was familiar with the clothing mentioned and was prepared to follow them, but he calmed himself in time to stop her from rushing towards the direction they mentioned to where Konkuro was following the abductors. Is it personal? She stiffened. It was enough to confirm it, but the swordswoman still nodded. Just be careful. That was enough of an approval, and she was shocked that he gave it. Her superior could have told her otherwise and she would have obeyed it as an order. Even though Stark made it appear he had freed her of the debt, she now owed her more than her life. For that she will be ever grateful. If you need help, just say so. This calmed her rage. While the Suna shinobi were discussing a course of action, they suddenly felt a sweeping wave. It came from the man of the group, and when he turned towards they saw the resolve in his eyes. Prepare a rescue team, we'll head them off. Amayuri, who already knew what he was going to do, chose to take the other shoulder before they disappeared as quickly as they had appeared. XXXXX. You're definitely taking your sweet time, for someone who can't wait. You weren't asked to. The bickering would have been entertaining if he wasn't fighting for his life. Konkuro was able to engage the enemies, but he sadly realized the skill gap because he was currently trying to survive against Sasori of the Red Sand. Suna's greatest puppeteer and member of the Akatsuki. It was fortunate that his partner, Didera, hadn't joined the fight, but it didn't comfort him because he was still outclassed by his opponent. After complaining, the blonde flew off with the captive, saying, take this with you, and a bag was slammed into his face. Opening and surprised that it contained his molding clay, he raised a fist and demanded, wait, why are you experiencing this? Too angry to mention his verbal snarl. I brought that stash you left for emergency, the hunchback calmly and unconcernedly replied while shattering another puppet. Wouldn't this count as one since you're not there? As Sasori broke the final puppet, the bomber began to grumble once more. Sasori decided to put an end to it by sending the tail in the direction of his victim, and Konkuro realized in a moment that it would not miss. However, he was pushed back by a cloud of sand that was thrown up by something, and then Sasori was hit by a lightning bolt that was visible from the sky. Senpai Sasori, however, something hit him as well, sending him crashing. The cloud settled, revealing two figures in front of him, one wielding two swords engulfed in electricity, the other holding the tail aimed at him. Then he turned to face the broken remnants of Sasori, and just as the black-clad puppeteer was about to express gratitude, he noticed something moving far away from the debris. Sasori was more interested in the newcomers, especially the one with lightning, but Konkuro watched with wide eyes as the lump rose to reveal a young, red-haired face, saying, "It seems we meet again." He opened a scroll with the kanji for "free" written on it and gave me a rather painful jab. "So tell me, how long till Kushimaru died? You did cost me to repair Hiriko the last time, also a fine puppet as well. Whatever their past, it wasn't pleasant as the lightning seems to convey her mood. His sword would have been very useful with my art." When Stark flew over and saw only a mound of clay, he thought dryly, "I should have known it wouldn't have been that easy." The first sign should have been the owl that was still in the air, but it suddenly headed straight for him before detonating, which he managed to avoid. The former Jinchuriki started to worry for his friend, but he sensed something behind him and quickly avoided some more bird-shaped bombs. He then saw the bomber, now perched on a larger bird, and Gaara being devoured by the clay construction. Another drawback was the Primera's recent mood. He noticed something was wrong after using Sonito to travel, and he believes the Garganta is to blame, but that had to wait. Fortunately, hollow skills were instinctive, because the Arankar is using every bit of them to fly, dodge, shoot, sense, and sometimes, curse the enraged blonde. It was a game of cat and mouse that alternated because he won't let the terrorist get away with his friend. "Are you aware? This little argument reminds me of one I had with my former sensei. He never did appreciate my art." Deidara remarked nonchalantly as he threw bombs at his tenacious foe. Stark could still hear that comment over the din, and he couldn't help but groan. "Oh no, another blonde artist." The blonde snarled, her eyes narrowed. "Have a problem with that, There was no genuine animosity between them. Despite the Shinigami being annoying, my wolves were just blasted by the last one. The artist's mood abruptly changed as he burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha, fascinating. That makes me want to get to know this guy." Flying past another explosion, the Primera commented, "Well, he's in another life if you want to know, sort of." "What a shame, sighing with real disappointment. "Oh well, another flock homed in on his victim. Just tell him that Deidara said hi, Katsu." They surrounded the swordsman and detonated as one, "blasted," was heard before he was eclipsed by the explosion. "Ha ha ha, I'm starting to like you already, Deidara cheered as the guy in white zoomed out of the smoke, sooty but otherwise unscathed. Then he gave chase again. "Take pride that you will be one of my great masterpiece, XXXXX." The fight down below was easier because Amayuri was up against one of Sasori's best weapons, which made Konkuro recognize and fear him. The puppet made from the body of their strongest cage. The onlookers could feel the rage of each strike as it landed, but the swordswoman's movements were still quick and controlled because she knew she couldn't afford to make a single mistake. She had already torn off both arms and was aiming for the head, but she quickly changed her mind as black substances splattered. "The Sat Tsu." Konkuro yelled. Amayuri was also familiar with the method, which was made possible by the Sandame's magnetic bloodline in life, but she was too busy to think about it as the iron particles sped in her direction. She avoids all of the sand projectiles and tendrils that are chasing her. She was at a disadvantage since she couldn't use lightning to enhance her tactics because it would only make the sands move more quickly toward her. However, the mask concealed her anguish when she realized she had been duped. More gathered above her, and the iron sand branched out into a cage, enclosing Amayuri. The iron sphere spread out, creating asymmetrical spikes that were drawing near at a frightening rate. To lead a play is the true measure of the skills of a puppeteer. You'll make a fine addition. Satetsu Kaiho. The Kiri Kunoichi prepared herself for a technique, knowing that even if she survived this attack, she would still die. Rai oomph. She was suddenly tackled and all she saw was black, literally. Amayuri recovered from the roll and peered over her shoulder at the spikes that followed. She glanced back quickly and became concerned because Fu was the one protecting her. She is highly skeptical that any of the strikes were missed because of the shreds in her clothing. However, she soon calms down and remembers that the Nanabi is responsible for the girl's nearly impenetrable skin. In addition, Fu employed a method that makes her skin even harder. As the discoloration went away, the Jinchuriki complained, "Ooh, you owe me big time." Amayuri knew that her initial impression of the girl was anything but positive, so she asked, "Why?" As she stood up, Fu gave her a look. She quickly pointed out something after saying, "Don't get any ideas. I still don't like you, but Stark said to help. So I did. And I'm not having that stunt you did this morning, got it?" She could only nod in shock. Nevertheless, Amayuri expressed her appreciation, "Thank you." However, they were cut off when a variety of shapes began to crash around them. This helped them return their attention to the issue. The more seasoned of the two shared her plan. When they were once again in close proximity to one another, she received a mumble in response to her statement. "I know you don't trust me, but please do." She gave the order, "Run and don't stop," as they charged in Sasori's direction. The iron tendrils rushed in their direction, but Amayuri changed course, leaving Fu to face the mass. Nevertheless, the girl continued running as it drew closer. Then suddenly the sand veered. Missing her. Sasori's limited ability to communicate was evident in the direction it went as the sand drew closer. She jumped out of the way, leaving a sword to continue charging electricity. Fu only needed this as she destroyed the now helpless puppet. A blade pierced his chest, but it was too late. He was shocked to lose his favorite puppet. They were embarrassed to see the arms jerked out, but they were on the verge of lowering their defenses before the puppeteer's allegedly deceased hand could seize her. Amayuri swiftly released the blade. They watched in horror as he pulled out the sword and threw it far away, saying, "You caught me by surprise there. Well played. A little bit more and it would have been all over." They morbidly realized how he had survived after taking off the cloak. "You turned yourself into a puppet. Ingenious, isn't it, Ba-chan?" he said, reaching out to the person with whom he had previously shared blood. A group from the same village he left was behind her. Everyone gaped in horror at what had happened to one of their best. "Now, I am no longer bounded by human limitation. With this, I can immortalize my art. I have a scroll," Sasori said. The technique's name came from the words that hung above it. "Bear witness to my greatest performance. My art that took down a country. Akahiji. Hyaki no Soin." Everyone was armed, and one of the puppeteers gave Kankuro a scroll so he could pull out his own weapon, the Shirahiji. Jiki Chikamatsu no Shu, summoned by Chiyo, was the most noteworthy. Amayuri picked up the last of the nearby sword as Fu stood close by, ready to launch another attack. A small-scale conflict had begun when Sasori unleashed the army he had called forth initially. A significant number were eliminated by his opponents, but as the smaller numbers became more coordinated in their attacks, it only worked to their advantage. However, as he engaged in combat, the living puppet became aware that he did not have complete control of the conflict. He felt that his puppetry and mastery alone could overwhelm the battalion if it weren't for the important players. His grandmother, Chiyo, was a skilled battle puppeteer in addition to the one he had previously battled. That tanned girl, on the other hand, was impervious to his poison, or at the very least, the blades coated in it couldn't penetrate her. The swordswoman, at last, she avoids and slashes everything in her path with her lightning speed and the enhanced element. Sasori surmised that the person interacting with Deidara possesses sufficient skills to occupy his partner. This motivated him to swiftly conclude his conflict. When he noticed the two women running toward him, one speeding and the other barreling through, he halted his musing. Sasori fired a pointed-tipped cable, undoubtedly laced with his unique poison, from the hole in his stomach. They managed to avoid it with ease, but a stream of water erupted from his hands, blinding them. After he made some changes, the stream became more rapid and under pressure. She attempted to block the shot by building an earth wall, but it was broken through, and the girl was carried away. Screaming in agony, he was happy to see a gash on her arm when she settled, suggesting that her impenetrability can only withstand so much. Sasori launched the cable as hard as he could while the wound remained open. The swordswoman materialized before her. She managed to deflect it, but as it flew to the side, she lost her hold on the remaining blade. An opportunity presented itself as the hands now spewed fire. Sasori was mentally shocked by the woman's saving grace because he thought they were trapped. Raiden. Sandefensu. Lightning generated from the one sword shot out and crossed over to its pair, which he spotted was at a distance adjacent to it. He could make out a screen of lightning separated them before they were engulfed by the flames. Even with the former head of the puppet brigade having summoned her legendary puppets, Kankuro was aware that they were slowly being overwhelmed, and it's only a matter of time. All of the red-clad puppets began to fall suddenly, even though it cannot be physically determined. Sasori was the most shocked of all. His arms stiffened as the flamethrowers stopped. As he looked down, he noticed a slender handle protruding from the compartment containing his final human component. "The Nuabari," he said, instantly recognizing it as the sword he wanted to use in his art. A figure fell in front of him. The girl emerged from the sand and said, "I made a vow that this blade will avenge its master." Looking over his shoulder, he saw a hole where the shield should have been. That would explain how they managed to get out of the fire. The barrier served only to give them enough time. He said blankly, "I guess this my end." Sasori would have felt it too. Had he still had a healthy heart, when he saw his grandmother's sad eyes he focused on the person who made his immortality possible because it was gradually fading. But before that, I have something to ask of you. Amayuri asked in a low voice, glaring, what makes you believe I'll do it? There would have been a shrug if he could still move. However, he decided to just keep staring. The masked kunoichi finally became interested enough to offer the value of a doubt when he said, I don't, but whatever you do with what I say doesn't matter since I'm dead anyway. I'm asking you because I bet you can relate to it. XXXXX. Sasori Senpai. The Espada only needed that distraction to get the blonde off his horse in order to free Gaara. He tore off the head. His face was suddenly marked with shock. Fu! Stark screamed. Tossing the body out carelessly, the remnants of the bird exploded as soon as he yelled. When she and her fellow Jinchuriki landed, Fu ignored the other shinobi as they surrounded the cage, turning her terrified gaze to the blast. She glared at the cause, who was once again in the air, saying, spectacular. It's wonderful that an audience was able to witness my great art. The terrorist then threw something in their direction while grinning maniacally. But why not be one as well? A bomb was dropped, and everyone watched in terror. They were horrified when it grew because they knew it was the one that had the power to destroy Sanagakure. XXXXX. Get me out of here. Come on, I'll tear that blonde bomb a piece. The holler was magnified by the pounding as Gaara was standing on a wooden grate in the middle of the desert. The seal's deteriorated and aged appearance demonstrated its fragility. He was responsible for preventing the escape of the prisoner below. Every time he passed out, he forced himself to complete this task. Shukaku. As they both looked up and saw a shadow enlarging in their direction, the struggle came to an end. As it approached, it kicked up sand, but it was easily recognized. Shomei. Bro. Shukaku would have mentioned that the Nanabi was his favorite sibling if he could only carry on a meaningful conversation. Shomei was the most entertaining of the older ones. Despite his distaste for the idea of superiority based on the number of tails, the first two were too moody at opposite extremes. Hey, Shukaku. It's been a while, ha ha ha. It's good to see ya. Now get me out of here. When he landed, the beetle merely shook his head. Sorry, no can do. What? Oh, come on, was the cry that came from the cell. The warden, however, wanted clarification. Who are you? With a cheeky reply, the Nanabi ignored the rude outburst. Chomei's head tipped slightly, and someone yelled, Yo! The name's Chomei. The Lucky Seven. And this here is Fu. The container of the Lucky Owl. Gaara could see a green-haired individual standing on the beetle's shoulder. Hey, how come that's what I get? Better yet, why are you doing the introductions? When Gaara had had enough, she yelled at them both. What are you doing here? Fu responded with a serious tone. A bomb is coming our way. I can get out, but the rest won't. You have to get out there and do something. Then go and wake me up. It's the only way I can leave while keeping him locked up. However, someone made the decision to step in. You just got blasted the other night. You need my power. Gaara expressed his conviction while glaring down. I won't listen to you. And they resumed their argument. Hey Shukaku. This put an end to the Tanuki again. Give him a hand, will ya? It may be a rocky start, but you gotta help the kid out if don't want to get caught. What? Gaara was about to let out a protest till he heard something impossible. Fine. The Jinchuriki's expression of incredulity suggested that he would have to elaborate if he wanted to make any progress. I'm not going down if I have any say in this. If it means working with you to save my ass, then I'll do it. As he asked the creature that had caused his previous pain, his glare reappeared. Why will I believe you? You tried to take over by deceiving me as my mother. Ha! If I had my way back then, I would have driven you crazy myself. I would have crushed anyone with my sand. But since she is stopping me, I have to trick her to my way of thinking. Make her think all around we're a danger to her, baby. Ha ha ha. Shukaku. Alright already, oi woman, I'll give my words now. Gaara was suddenly surrounded by a bright red seal that glowed. Then the surrounding sand began to whip around the prison, but his meticulous evaluation was unaffected. The fact that it was the same kanji he had on his forehead startled him. In front of him, sands began to accumulate and gradually took the shape of a figure. His breath took on a feminine form, and he was unaware that he was holding it as he looked into the face of the woman he believed he had previously left. Tears began to trickle down his cheek for a variety of reasons. Who? Don't you recognize? That's your mother, or at least a part of her, he said, waiting for the realization to sink in before moving on. Before that woman died, she left this to keep watch. Regarding your safety, she decides everything. She's the one keeping me at bay, so don't get ahead of yourself. The Ichibi was the target of the sand replica's expectant gaze. Finally, with a heavy huff, Shukaku gave in. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'll help protect your son. The grates began to rattle until the wind lifted some of the pieces. Gaara disregarded this since he was attempting to contact the person who had loved him all along as everything blurred. Kagura took his hand and grinned. Just remember, I'm only doing this for my bro. XXXXX Tamari commanded. Everyone, run. As she got ready to deflect the projectile however, she is aware that she is limited in what she can accomplish. However, the desert came to life as Gaara abruptly ran past her. A terrifying shape emerged from the sand, slammed its enormous arms against its body, and released a concentrated ball of air. A sandstorm was created by the collision. The action was intended to push the explosion away from them, they realized. Gaara. The blast engulfed their cage's location even though it could no longer reach them. They were terrified of what they saw. Once the sand had settled, they have been protected from the blast by the imposing shape of the Shukaku, but Tamari caught something peculiar at the base. She wasn't surprised that the sand wrapped around him. What confused her was that it took shape, that of a woman, like a mother protecting her child in a loving embrace. As they approached him, she noticed Gaara's peaceful expression. You were always there to protect me, Ka-san, he whispered as he fell into a blissful unconsciousness. Tamari could swear that the feminine sand figure smiled at her as the other one started to fade. From above, Deidara watched in utter frustration as the bomb did not accomplish its goal. He also realized that the mission was a failure when he saw them regrouping following Sasori's defeat. He might as well give a parting gift if he was going to go. However, a sudden sense of impending doom caught him in the corner of his eye. Before he could cast the technique, he turned just in time to see a huge, bright beam that was moving too quickly to avoid him. A tiny part of the artist regretted that he would never be able to fully appreciate the blast's beauty in the midst of his fear. The blonde terrorist is completely obscured by the beam, leaving those below in awe and terror. They followed it until they reached a white object in the sky. Stark, who was panting heavily, lowered the finger he was pointing at the Sero since he had already poured as much Riryoku for his Hiero and regeneration. This finally showed how tired he was. He understood that he could be gravely injured, if not killed, by the blast. As he was falling to the ground, he finally decided, looks like I need to be more careful now. Stark felt Fu's grip on him, but he didn't care. How did he find out? Unless he was caught by a large bug. The buzzing sound was a dead giveaway as Gaara was cared for by those who valued him. The Hollow watched with joy and a hint of jealousy. Before long, a medic appeared in front of him and was about to begin healing when a voice interrupted her. He doesn't need treatment. The medic was about to object, but Amayuri went on, kneeling next to the man who had fallen. As we speak, he is already using a technique to heal himself. Allow him to rest and he will quickly recover. The medic left, allowing Stark to respond silently because he was afraid of what they might find. The oldest sibling was then seen coming toward them. She made a little bow to them. In behalf of Sanagakure, I thank you for your assistance in rescuing our cage. For this, we accept to hear your proposal to forge an alliance between our villages. However, she raised her head and gave Stark another perplexed look. Despite her gratitude, she can't help but believe that there was more to this. Your support is appreciated, but it was beyond the line of duty. What did you risk your life for? For a friend. He was unaware that they had heard his whisper as he passed out, which only made Tamari more perplexed. XXXXX. As he climbed out of bed, the sluggish Espada thought, I'm beginning to regret that wish. He was fine except for a slight soreness in his joint. He discovered that everything was in its proper place, even the jacket that, according to his memory, took the brunt of the explosion. Ignoring this, Stark glanced at a note that was addressed to him and quickly read it. The cage wished to speak with you. Fu is with me. We will be waiting. Dragon Tempest. She isn't wasting time to put it to use, and it has only been a day. This made him perspire. He knew it wasn't forged if he guessed her reason for using the title. Nevertheless, he left as soon as he got dressed. XXXXX. Now behave and start getting along with the kid. Yeah. Stop bothering his beauty sleep. Got it. I find this new development very peculiar. Hey, I'm just as new to this as you are. This fragmented but vivid conversation would be unsettling to others. However, those in attendance are aware that these two are conversing with another pair in their minds. However, the ones from Suna are still experiencing uneasiness. The bloodthirsty legend of the desert is still held by their brother, after all. Tamari turned to the other Kiri envoy, who had already removed her mask, and decided to think of something else. You said he hasn't been in Suna. How is he going to get here? According to Amayuri, he has a way. After 45 minutes they are still awaiting the final member after the Jinchuriki and Biju concluded their conversation some time ago. Are you sure? Have I made a mistake? A knock caught everyone's attention before Amayuri's mind could speculate about his whereabouts. The subject of their conversation was then made clear by this. You're late. Being disciplined was essential to being the greatest shinobi village in Kirigakure. The Primera's shocked face was a mixture of confusion. Really? What time was it then? She was embarrassed when she realized what she had forgotten in that note and had nothing more to say. Amayuri calmly schooled her features to an understanding one in order to preserve some grace. May we know what took you to get here? He was scratching his head sheepishly, and she wasn't sure if that was a good thing. Well, I immediately sensed you, but decided to walk here. But along the way, I came across a group from yesterday. You can say they took some time to thank me. I was about to leave, but some insisted to treat a meal. I guess I was hungry, so I accepted. They even gave takeouts to bring along. He was waving the wrapped package in his hand. He had no idea where he got the ability to make up stories, but he felt that someone could have done worse. Want some? He asked that someone was unlucky enough to be sipping a hot beverage at that moment. The Primera then politely addressed his friend in One Life after giving it to Amayuri. Good morning, was there something you need? Gaara nodded and pointed to the last empty chair. Yes, please have a sit. Stark observed that Gaara's aura changed to one befitting his current position after he had taken his seat. First of all, I wish to thank you all for saving my life. I know that your mission was only to extend an alliance, but your assistance will ensure that whatever we'll discuss will be merited. The Sand siblings were shocked when the swordsman got up and started to walk away. You're welcome if that is all. Then we better go now. Tamari questioned. Why? Weren't you here for an alliance? Stark turned around and gestured to the person donning Kiri's forehead protector. They would have discovered later that it was the other way around. Well, that's her mission, we just tagged along. Wait. Stark turned back to the cage, releasing his grip on the doorknob. Forgive me, I appreciate your help, but there is something you are not telling me. Kankuro then questioned, if it wasn't your mission, why did you risk your life for him? Gaara confirmed that claim before Stark could offer any justifications. Tamari told me that you did this, for a friend. Who are you referring to? As they stood there, the Hollow debated internally what response to give. He remained silent for a moment before giving in, cursing the dangers. Sigh, you. Gaara was shocked again, her thoughts swirling. I will apologize again, but I have never met you. Stark continued, shaking his head. I guess it can't be helped. 3 years can do that to you. You and I were a lot different back then, more so if compare me now, but we were so similar too. In fact, I could have been like you. You asked what I fought for. I did say it was for my precious. Sands held the espada in a crushing grip as he was abruptly slammed into the wall. He straightened up and glanced back at Gaara's irate expression. You're lying. He died at the hands of those he swore to protect. He died alone. His two companions were ready, but they haven't taken any action yet. They were being held back by Stark's composed manner. They waited anxiously to see how he would handle his friend after deciding to believe what he had said. He spoke again just as Gaara was about to exert more pressure. He was frozen in place, recalling where he had heard the words, it's almost unbearable, isn't it? The pain of being all alone. His siblings were uneasy as the Sands moved, seemingly expressing someone suppressing an emotion. I know that feeling. I've been there, in that dark and lonely place. Stark landed on his feet as the Sands began to loosen. They turned back to Gaara, whose expressionless face conveyed more feelings in a minute than in a lifetime. They turned back to face the speaker, who was now wearing a tiny smile. That's had become of me, but you. They said. They pondered how it could contain both happiness and sorrow. I'm glad you had found others that save you from the loneliness. Naruto. Hey, Gaara. Gaara's voice returned after a startled silence. Be you, but how? The former Jinchuriki briefly explained his predicament, even revealing the whole, saying, like I said, 3 years can do that to you. Better have everyone take a sit. I'm not sure if you're going to believe any of this. As they attempted to process everything, the tension gave way to an uncomfortable bewilderment. Gaara, however, chose to overlook this since his friend had returned, albeit altered just as they were ready to catch up. Tamari nervously broke the bad news after she finished. Everyone, not just those in the room, could sense his intense frown. They're going to do what? He asked. They were subjected to an extremely strong and terrifying pressure that even caused the Ichibi to mimic a turtle. The force that hit Gaara made him try not to shake, but the sand seems to show how uncomfortable he is. Even though those who witnessed this firsthand fared better, it was still a terrifying event. They watched him regain composure and get to his feet with a serious expression. Sorry to cut our reunion short, but I must be going now. Yes, we shall aid. No, you'll not get involved in this, he said, shocking them with his loud voice. However, the cage soon realized how serious his remarks were. Why? They realized the weight of his actions and that, as much as they hated to admit it, there would be severe consequences if they helped. Anything you do with me will be nothing less than a declaration of war officially. I have no ties with anyone, and that stays that way in getting into troubles. The village is in dire need of him. Despite his desire to assist, he was able to identify the resolve he had faced 3 years prior. When he looked back, his life was changed by the same conviction he saw in someone else's eyes. Gaara chose to accept his friend's reasoning and put his faith in him. "I understand, be careful, my friend." After that, he departed, and Fu followed right away. Gaara reflected on how much his friend had evolved. If that was only a small portion of the power he was aware of, then hey, Gaara. We're buds now, Rig, right? Even now, the Jinchuriki still finds it difficult to have a meaningful conversation with the demon that has been tormenting him. Why? He can even feel the tremors the Tanuki was causing in his mind. "Let's not make him mad," he says, and it was difficult for him to accept that he had a constructive disagreement with him. "Excuse me." The Sand siblings realized that the Kiri swordswoman had also left when the door closed.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.